Good evening, Wakefield, and welcome to the Town Council meeting for October 28th, 2019. This meeting, along with all of our others, are being recorded. I do want to note that tonight's meeting will require an executive session to begin. We have two items required for discussion in executive session: the Woods subdivision litigation and the DPW laborer's contract. And both of those discussions would cause the town to have detrimental effects if we were to have those discussions in an open forum. So with that, I will entertain a motion for a roll call vote to go into executive session.
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor May. The roll call vote. Councilor Chines. Aye. Councilor May. Aye. Councilor Smith-Galvin.
Aye.
Vice Chair Santos.
Aye.
Councilor Donaco and Councilor Dombrowski, noting that Councilor Butt is currently absent, so a vote of 6-0. At this point, we will go into executive session. We expect that will continue until 7 p.m. when the open town council meeting will begin. Thank you. Good evening again, Wakefield, and welcome back to the Town Council meeting for October 28th, 2019. This evening we're joined by very special guests, one of whom is beside me. This is Alexa Milligan. Alexa? Alexa is part of Girl Scout Troop 62842. They'll be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance, but I first asked Alexa if she would to do us the honor of gaveling in tonight's meeting. So Alexa? And with that, our meeting is gavelled in. Thank you very much. So again, I welcome tonight our Girl Scout Troop 62842. They're at the junior level. They are all fourth graders from various schools within Wakefield, from Walton, Woodville, Greenwood, and St. Joseph's. And they are a troop of 21 girls in total. They are led by Evelyn Graff and Jen McRobbie. And the troop is interested in how government works. And so they're here tonight to participate and understand how government works at the local level and to make and how we make our local decisions for our community. So girls, welcome, and thank you so much for coming. And with that, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll all stand and then we'll turn it over to you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Girl Scout Troop 62842. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, girls. Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is item number 4. That is attendance, and I see that all 7 counselors are in attendance, as well as Madam Clerk, Town Administrator, and Town Council Mullen. So thank you for that. Item number 5 is approval of the minutes. These are the regular Town Council meeting minutes from October 7th, 2019. I will entertain a motion for the approval of those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor Chines. Any discussion? Seeing none, councilors, the motion before you is the approval of the October 7th, 2019 regular Town Council meeting minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
With a vote of 7-0, the motion carries. Item number 5B of the agenda is also from October 7th, 2019. These are the executive session meeting minutes that all town councilors have been previously provided. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor Smith-Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, councilors, the motion before you is the approval of the executive session meeting minutes from October 7th, 2019. All those in favor?
Aye.
Seeing a unanimous vote of 7-0, the motion carries. Item number 6 on our agenda is public engagement. This is the opportunity for members of the public to sit before the council to address any issues or concerns that they may have. We ask that the discussion is limited to 3 minutes, and then in my discretion, we can extend beyond that, and if any councilors have follow-up questions, they'll be allowed to ask them at that time. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone that signed up for public participation this evening?
Yes, Chairman, we do. David, the first one is David Silvaro. Yes.
If you could please take a seat at the table, provide your name and address for us.
Yeah, my name is David Silvano. I live at 45 Sylvan Ave here in Wakefield. here with my wife Marcy and my other neighbor Dawn. Thank you for giving me this short time to address the board and my fellow citizens. When I moved to this town 32 years ago, the DPW still worked out of the town nursery at the bottom of Sylvan Ave. I remember the volunteers would go there and they'd tend to the trees and other supplies on a regular basis. Since that time, we, meaning the town, has let the nursery become completely run down with many invasive species such as the Norway maple that you guys are going to be talking about this evening, bamboo, bittersweet, etc., that have crept its way south from that lot all the way up through the woods on Sylvan Ave. You'll find no less than 6 dead, magnificent oak trees, all choked out by these Norway maples. On Sylvan Ave, and the health of our pine trees have diminished as well, and many of those pine trees have also fallen, being choked out by these Norway maples. It appears to me, in regards to what you'll be discussing this evening with the Thaders, it's almost as if we're taking advantage of this young couple by having them plant something 100 times better than what was taken down in the first place, which was nothing less than a weed choking out what good trees we had there, pines and oaks. A tree is not just a tree, and the removal of these invasive tree-killing maples was actually doing us a favor by the town by eliminating a problem that our own town created. To in turn have a great young family foot the bill for 30 trees that will not survive the long term. Those 30 trees you're going to want to plant will be choked out by the Norway maples that shouldn't be there in the first place. If we plant new trees in place of the invasive Norway maples that were moved, they will be choked out. I'd be first in line to help bring the invasive maples under control, and could probably amass a small army to replant trees from my neighborhood alone. We love our neighborhood. I'm asking for the board to do what's right, eradicate the invasive species our town let fester, and acknowledge that other than trespassing, Mr. Theda did us a favor by removing an invasive species that will not allow a replacement tree to survive. Nowadays, doing something just for the sake of having done something seems the norm. But if we move ahead replacing trees on someone else's dime that will not survive, what have we accomplished? Please consider having the Thedas please reconsider having the Thedas replace the trees at this time. He wrecked a Hyundai, and we're asking him to replace it with a Cadillac. It's not fair, considering our town created the problem in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silvaro. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone else that signed in?
Yes, we do. We have Julie Scott.
Would you please take the table, identify yourself and your address, please?
Sure. Julie Scott, 226 Main Street, Wakefield. I've passed out some information to you, and I will be speaking to a lot of that. I will be speaking mostly to what you have in there called the 3 votes taken by registered voters, so I'll be speaking in that order, if that helps you. I also passed out some pages, 2.5 pages of when I did a search result online on the town charter. I came up with 2.5 pages of information about the term chairman in our town charter. Some of it is from 1950, some of it you will find the term selectman in there, and the last box is the charter change from a couple of years ago, so there are 13 items. So here I go. 2 years ago, the Bylaw Review Committee, along with you, the then Board of Selectmen, now Town Council, promoted amendments to our Home Rule Charter as our town's constitution. And I'm speaking to an amendment that I feel has not been implemented fully. The move to change the name of the Board of Selectmen to the Town Council was more than just a name change. You stated a need to remove gender from our town's charter. 2 years ago, the then Board of Selectmen spoke of the need to be an inclusive community. I have given you newspaper stories from 2 years ago stating this, and they're in front of you. From November 2017 to November 2018, the amendments passed through 2 town meeting votes, and then the taxpayers funded a townwide election. In front of you is the ballot wording on a sample ballot that has become the charter wording. It is now degenderized, and it states the chair of any public body would be known as the chairperson. So I speak first, and you have the wording in front of you, from the town meeting, Fall 2017, Article 5. And it says to replace the words full board with the words full council. It says to replace the word chairman with the word chairperson, and so forth. You have that in front of you. Voters like me were led to believe that since the word chairman would not appear in the charter, which is our constitution, it would not appear in the business of the town. Our charter explains who will not use the term, and I gave that to you as well. It says, town agency or the word agency shall mean any board, council, commission, committee, department, or office of town government, whether elected, appointed, or otherwise constituted. And I highlighted that for you in your packets. The townwide election of April 2018 passed a ballot question, and the wording you have in front of you. It says that the amendment would change the name of the Board of Selectmen to the Town Council. Members of the Town Council would be known as councilors, and the chair of that or any other public body would be known as the chairperson. And then we had the Fall Town Meeting 2018, Article 17, which was the final step to complete the name and terminology change. And I highlighted specifically Section C of that article that states, replace the word chairman wherever it appears with the word chairperson. And I'm concerned that a full year has gone by, and I'm wondering if we're following through. Since May, with the change of the chair of this council, the word has been on each of your agendas at least twice, with the exception of the July agenda, as the chair was not present at that meeting. Tonight's agenda in front of you has the term chairman used twice. The correct wording of the charter change is found only in the left margins of your agendas, not in the body of your work tonight, and I see symbolism in that. Can I keep speaking?
You're at
I
3
heard the
minutes now,
timer.
so if you could wrap up your
Okay.
thoughts.
I see symbolism in that. It's unfortunate that the recent tri-board meeting of the Town Council, School Committee, and Finance Committee had an agenda with the term chairman that appeared 10 times. If this practice is acceptable, what if one woman headed or chaired one of these committees? Would she be the one labeled differently from the rest? Is this equal for all? 2 years ago, you spoke of the need to have equal language in all work done on behalf of the town. Citizens look to the town council and officials to set a high bar for all town bodies. Wording for agendas is carefully planned and must accurately reflect the desires of the voters. I wish for our town council to set a strong example for all work done on behalf of the town. Other committees need to follow the charter as well. Reach out to see that the charter wording is implemented by all public agencies that the charter refers to, meaning any board, council, commission, it's all highlighted for you. Taxpayers deserve to see that the intent of the ballot question that they funded is respected. 3 times voters spoke to this, and the debate's long over. I ask all in front of me to use their various roles to oversee the proper implementation of any and all charter changes now and in the future. I ask the council to consider our upcoming town meeting. The tri-board meeting agenda demonstrates a real need for a strong commitment from all town agencies to be sure that the wording on the upcoming town meeting warrant and contained within any accompanying slide or video presentations accurately reflects the vocabulary incorporated in our charter. 2 years ago, you all spoke of needing language that lacks gender, language that equalizes all. If my understanding of any of this subject matter is misguided in any way, I would certainly welcome any feedback, and I sincerely thank you all for what you do for the town.
Thank you,
I-
Ms.
I
Scott, for
didn't
that.
know if Anybody had any?
I will do my best to just briefly address that, since it appears directed at me. The standard that I am.
It's addressed at a bunch of committees. This isn't the only, I've been searching online.
Ms. Scott, you had your opportunity to speak, and I'm going to respond to you if I may. With respect to the position of chairperson, I absolutely agree. That is what the town agreed upon. That is the position. It is a gender-neutral position. The occupant of that position can assign the identity to it. As a man, I can be identified as a chairman. As a woman, that person can be identified as a chairwoman. And so that is keeping consistent with the way that the New York Times identifies any number of political figures. Right down to Washington. Whenever you see a reference in the New York Times, and I actually looked into this because I was curious, and the New York Times specifically, has made it their practice from the top down to treat the position as a gender-neutral position, but the occupant of that position assigns the identity. And in this instance, for this year, as a man, I'm in the role of chairman. Next year, if there is a woman in this position, that would be a
And there will
chairwoman. And that is how it would be followed.
In
So that-
2018, January of 2018, the chairman at that time and then the chairman who followed, and I think I gave you 2 agendas from January of 2018. At the beginning of the month, it was chairman and vice chair. And then they politely, and I wish I had noticed then because I would have thanked them publicly, they changed it. And that was prior to the town meeting, to the town ballot of 2018. So,
I-
2 chairmans in front of you.
Ms. Scott, I've explained the position, and I thank you for your feedback. It certainly is appreciated, but I've provided the explanation.
So for
Thank you.
the tri-board agenda.
No, yeah, yes. But if I may, I'll respond to that. For the tri-board meeting, all 3 of the leaders were all men. And so they were appropriately identified as chairman. If there was a woman that was in that post, certainly it would have been chairwoman. So
And the
there-
rest would have been chairman.
Well, whatever their gender is. I
Okay.
mean, if there were 2 women and 1 man, it would have been 2 chairwomen and 1 chairman. Yes, but again, I absolutely agree with you that this position is a gender-neutral position. Town councilor makes it easier. The chairperson position is gender-neutral. The person who is sitting in this seat assigns the gender to it. And in this case, as a man, I'm identifying as a chairman, in the same way that a woman sitting in this position would identify as a chairwoman. But thank you for your comments.
So, thank
Yes,
you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor
So,
Chines.
I think the assumption that a woman in the position of chair would identify as chairwoman is not correct. I think that, when you look at the intention behind the name change, I think it was to have a gender-neutral name change.
That's what
I
I
think
heard.
Ms. Scott's comments around, adhering to the policy change, adhering to the charter and the bylaw changes that we made, I think is a good one, and it's something that, as a town body, we as the town council, as well as the other boards and commissions in town, really should try our best to adhere to. It passed overwhelmingly in town meeting, it passed overwhelmingly in the ballot. The symbolism of having a gender-neutral name was something that was really important to a majority of voters in the town, myself including, as one person who spoke for it. I really appreciate you bringing this up because I
This
do
is
think
a
it's an
hard
issue
thing
that
to
we've got to
speak
be mindful of.
Ms. Scott, respectfully, I gave you additional time. I would ask that the councilors be allowed the opportunity to speak now. Thank you. Thank you. Vice Chair.
So
Chair
I don't
Santos.
know that anyone yelled louder about changing it from Board of Selectmen to Town Council. Maureen and I were on the front lines of doing that, but I disagree with you. I disagree with you too, Jonathan.
That's right.
I don't think, and I was I was a liaison to the Charter Commission. I understand making it gender neutral, and I agree with you that if I became chair person next year, I may not go by chairwoman, I may just go by chair. That would be my choice. But in no way did I ever think that someone could not choose to call themselves chairwoman if they wanted to. That was not in the discussion. We eradicated the name chairman from all the town documents because chairman. We made it chair. That doesn't mean that I might not refer to myself as chairwoman of my choice. I might refer to myself as chair of my choice. I'm not sure, but I don't want to be told that I can't refer to myself as chairwoman. So as someone who was on the front line of this, who wrote articles, who spoke about it, who was interviewed about it, nothing was more important at that time for me to make sure that we led the fight to become a town council. But I disagree with going to the nitty-gritty of suggesting that using chairman or chairwoman goes against the grain of that for the one who's doing it. And I understand. I'm in higher academia. I understand all the gender arguments. I live with them every day. But I do think if I were to be chair next year, referring to myself as chairwoman would not go against what myself, Maureen, and other people, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Maureen, but what I was fighting for to become town council, and that's just my comment. It doesn't need to be commented on.
If I may, I'm looking directly at the ballot. That's where my lens was looking at the ballot.
And Ms. Scott, I don't disagree with you that the position generically is chairperson, that of a chairperson. A chair, call it chair being, chairperson, a person. And to Vice Chair Santos's point, I refer to her as Vice Chair Santos. That's how she is referred to. That's how she wants to be referred to. it's a personal choice.
But it does say the
but
replacement of the word chairman.
Within the
Agreed.
documents.
Within the documents, absolutely. And everywhere, it should be gender neutral everywhere, yes, indeed. Thank you very much, and we appreciate you bringing the issue before us.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Clerk, do we have any other public participation this evening?
Yes, we do. We have Michael Thader.
Good evening. If you just identify yourself and your address for the record, please.
Mike Dater, 41 Sylvan Ave. I just wanted to come before you guys, Counselor, Mrs. Dalton, Mr. Mayo, and Mr. Mullen, just to echo what was in my letter to you guys and just sincerely apologize for having you guys have to deal with this issue and hear all the complaints from the town about this. This is the last thing I wanted to do was bother people in this town with this issue, and I know I took something on my own liberty that I definitely should not have, and I know that mistake now, and I really want to apologize to Mr. Fazio, who's right back there, because I know he spent a ton of time on this, and I feel really bad about that. I meant to read my letter, but my phone's not working, but I'll read my letter if you guys want me to.
The letter you had provided?
Yes.
We actually have copies of
Okay.
it. I believe it's in the packet, so all of us have read it. I think everyone's read it at this point, correct?
Okay.
Yes. So we thank you for that. That will
Okay.
come up later on this evening.
Okay.
If you did have anything to say, this would be your opportunity. Again, you said a lot in your letter, so
Yeah, I
you
mean,
can let
I
it stand.
just want to echo what's in my letter, and just really, I wanted to come here and apologize to you guys in person,
Right.
because I know this is something you guys didn't want to deal with.
Well, we appreciate you doing that. Thank you very much. And again, that will come up on the agenda item. I think it's around item number 11 or thereabouts. So we will
Thank you.
discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, do we have anyone else that's signed in for this evening?
No, that's it.
All right, so with that, we have concluded public engagement. I see, actually, we're actually a bit behind in that we have a public hearing that was set for 7:10 PM, but unfortunately, we ran a little bit late with public comment on that. The public hearing this evening is related to the tax classification. Because it is a public hearing, I will require from this body a motion to open up the public tax classification hearing, so I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Counselor Chines, seconded by Vice Chair Santos. I will take a roll call vote, beginning with Counselor Chines.
Aye.
Counselor May. Counselor Smith-Galvin. Vice Chair Santos.
Yes.
Counselor Donaco and Counselor Butt.
Yes.
And I as well, so 7-0. So we will now open up this public tax classification hearing. I'd like to first welcome the Director of Assessments. Is Victor here?
He's hiding.
Yes.
I think what he's down.
Oh, am I on?
You are on, Victor.
Takes so much longer to become camera ready. Let's see here.
And we have Director of Assessments, Victor Centinelo. So good evening, and thank you for coming. And I know you have a presentation that everyone has been provided. I should also point out to everyone at home that these materials are also part of the packets that are available on our town's website. Under the Town Council page, there are PDFs of materials. You can click on that and follow along, as well as view them on the screen.
All right, so folks, how long do you want me to take? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20? No, 20.
How long it takes.
However you think.
All right,
need.
well, welcome to our classification hearing. Thank you very much for having us. I'm joined by Brian Donegan, our newest board member, who was elected in April.
Hey, Brian.
Both Mr. Tyne and Ms. Daddario send their regrets for being unable to make it this evening. So, what are we here to do tonight? We're here to
Move the clicker if Tom can hear us.
there we go.
All right.
All right. So this evening, 4 actions are required by the town council. Selection of a minimum residential factor, selection of an open space discount, granting of a residential exemption, and the granting of a small commercial exemption. Minimum residential factor. A residential factor of 1 would yield a single tax rate of $14.31. Thank you. $14.31 per thousand of value, and simple calculation, total tax levy divided by the total value of the town yields a single tax rate. Chapter 200 allows us to shift that tax burden, in our case, an additional 75% onto commercial property owners. Historically, Wakefield has chosen this maximum shift option afforded to them. This next slide shows you various options. If no shift were to take place, you see we'd have a residential and commercial rate of $14.31. And at the maximum shift rate, we see the residential tax rate goes down to $12.83, and the commercial tax rate goes up to $25.04. And again, everything in bold represents your maximum option for fiscal year 2020. For this fiscal year, the average single-family value is $555,900. And based on the chart I showed you before, this is what the estimated tax bills would be at those various shift points. So if we were to select 1.75 as our option and a $555,900 single-family value, the estimated tax liability would be $7,132. By shifting to the max, as you can see also, it saves the average residential taxpayer $823. The average commercial value is slightly over $1,350,000. And again, you see the results in bold at the bottom at a 1.75 shift would yield an estimated tax bill of $33,894. So, in order to vote for a minimum residential factor, if it's the board's will to maintain the maximum shift option, as it has historically done, your minimum residential factor would be 0.896750, which I estimate will yield $12.83 for a residential tax rate, $25.04 for commercial and industrial and personal property tax rate. Please know that these rates can change slightly through the Department of Revenue approval process. Average tax bills from 19 to 20. This just shows a breakdown. In 19, the average value was a little over $528. Now it's almost $556. The average tax bill at those anticipated rates is up 5.25%. Or $355. Average commercial bill is up 2.7%, or $892. But it's also important to mention 2020 is the 6th year of the full debt exclusion for the Galvin Middle School. The debt exclusion adds almost $2.5 million to the tax levy. It adds 41 cents to the residential tax rate, or $228 to the average single-family tax bill, and 81 cents to the commercial industrial rate, or just under $1,100 to that tax bill. Sales activity. The assessments people will see on their tax bills at the end of December are based on sales primarily during calendar year 2018. So in we compared 2017 to 2018. Sale amounts, property sold, is about the same, 223 to 220. Days on market increased a little bit for 2018 to 39.8, yet the average sale price went up 8.5%. A discount for open space. Open space is defined by land which is not otherwise classified and which is not taxable under provisions of Chapter 61A or 61B. 61A and 61B are reserved for agricultural and sporting. I think 61B, we have a portion of a golf course that falls under the valuation methodology for 61B, and we actually have 3 small parcels that are a small working farm in Wakefield. But it's not, to qualify for the discount, it can't be held for the production of income, but maintain an open and natural condition which contributes significantly to the benefit and enjoyment of the public. A maximum exemption of 25% could be adopted. We've never adopted it, and the town is unaware of any properties that may fit the constraints of this legal definition. Residential exemption. A residential exemption of up to 35% of the average residential value could be adopted. And it's only done in a handful of communities, Boston, Cambridge, I used to work in Chelsea, and Brookline. They do it. A residential tax rate would go from $12.83 to $15.51 if we did a 20% exemption. At 35%, the residential rate would go up to $18.39. The break-even point is $620,200. What that means is approximately 30% of the homes in Wakefield would be paying for a residential exemption for everybody else. Wakefield is largely a single-family community, and most homes are owner-occupied. There is no benefit, in my opinion, to adopting a residential exemption. Small commercial exemption. An exemption of up to 10% of the property valuation for commercial properties only, not industrial. Eligible businesses cannot have more than 10 employees as certified by the Department of Employment and Training. Building value cannot exceed $1 million. One business in a building cannot qualify unless every other business in that building qualified. The exemption doesn't go to the business owner, it goes to the building owner. And the assessing department hasn't seen a majority of properties that could stand to benefit from the adoption of this type of exemption. This is last year's tax rate info because, of course, the surrounding communities along with us have not had our 2020 tax rate certified. But you can see we stack up against our neighbors and the average single-family tax bills. Let's see here. I forgot to mention this down the bottom. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're in the middle of the pack with average single-family tax bills. But that's just to let you know what our neighbors are doing. Average single-family tax bill from 2006 to present. This is what the average bill has been for all those years. And it's increased an average of about 4.5% a year. Next slide, same recap except with commercial tax bills. And
Victor, can I just
Yeah.
ask you a question? Because sometimes I think this is misleading. When you say the single-family tax bill has increased an average of 4.5%, certainly starting in 2006, I mean, property values have gone through the roof since then, which is where the increase is from.
yes,
Yeah, but I think some people think we're raising we're raising taxes and the residential rate, you know, that raise is coming from what we have control over, other than the economy's doing well, our housing market is really strong.
a bunch of years ago when property values were in a downturn, Wakefield was largely impervious to that downturn nationally and in other areas of Massachusetts. We held our own. There's no denying the explosive growth in the residential sector we've benefited from. But as we all know, the control of the town council rests with the allocation of the tax levy, the distribution, the shift, the amount of revenue raised vis-a-vis the tax base is governed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in Proposition 2.5, so we can't exceed those limits either. This sheet gives the various shift factors for surrounding communities. And Wakefield, Saugus, and Stoneham each have the capacity to go to 1.75 and do in fact go to 1.75. Melrose could do 1.75, they chose a little bit less at 1.68. And the other parts of the spreadsheet show what the residential tax base split was before any shift and after the shift. And same with the commercial properties. That's all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
Do you have any questions, Mr. Santinella? Councilor Donato.
Victor, thank you very much. I appreciate you giving us the yearly tax analysis that you do for us, and such a good job at doing it. Victor, thank you. Mind block. It's a sign of age. What is the percentage this year compared to last year as to how much the residential tax rate will make up compared to commercial? Did I miss it on here?
Let's see. Should be that last slide. So, we go to the last slide. This is the 2019 tax shift, but it's very similar. The tax base for Wakefield starts out at basically 12.5% commercial, with the rest being residential before any shift. After a maximum shift, the commercial base absorbs 22% of the tax levy, and the residential side absorbs the remaining 78.
So, excuse me. So my concern overall has been the same as it has been for the last 5 months or so. Last year, it was 72.28. This year, it is 78.21.9. So there's a big change occurring between how much our commercial and how much our residential play into this. Do you see that being a alternate shift where the residential is ultimately going to be paying more than?
It's referred to in my profession as a reverse shift. As as residential properties continue to break records every year, I'm
Right.
simply amazed. Commercial properties are not performing at the same rate. You saw we had 8.5% growth in residential sale price from year to year.
Right.
Commercial isn't doing that. So what that does is it pumps up the residential side of the ledger and inhibits the capacity to shift onto the commercial sector. So in fact, the residential properties are absorbing more of a share of the tax burden.
Thank you on that one. When was the last time in your memory that we didn't do a 1.75 shift?
Never.
We've never done it. We've never not done it, thank you.
Yeah.
Proper English. We've never not done it. So with that being said, for consideration by this board, when we have this discussion, I really wouldn't be opposed to not going to the 1.75, but actually going to the 1.50 instead, and giving the businesses at this point a break and relief so that they're not absorbing the entire hit that we normally hit them with. I understand that we always try to take care of the taxpayer, but we should be taking care of the businesses that work in this town, that support the town in a lot of ways. So when we do this shift, instead of doing the full 1.75, just do a 1.50. But that's just my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Counselor Chines?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Santinelli, both for putting this together, and we had the opportunity to spend some time on Friday morning with probably a remedial class in tax assessing for me, so I appreciate that. Just wanted to confirm two things, and then I had a thought in relation to Councilor Donaco's suggestion. First, just confirm that the levy amount at the beginning of the presentation does reflect the full 2.5% increase in the levy year over year as allowed by Prop 2.5.
That is our allowed levy for fiscal year 2020.
Great. And then just the second question, not on this slide, but on the comparative slides of tax rates, and we had discussed this before, but Melrose is before the override that they just passed recently, so while they're showing a lower tax rate, our assumption is that's probably not the comparison that we would see in fiscal 20.
That's correct.
So thank you for that. Just a thought, Councilor Donaco, on your point, I think you raise a really excellent point, which is one of the dynamics we've seen which has affected residential taxpayers is the fact that commercial values haven't kept up. And certainly that's something that creates some interesting dynamics in the tax rates, both for commercial and for residential owners. My concern about going to a 1.50 shift versus 1.75 is that it almost exacerbates that that shift where residential taxpayers are paying more and more of the burden because commercial rates aren't keeping up. I understand the importance and sort of the desire to provide relief to the commercial tax base, but my concern is in a year where residential taxes will go up because property values are going up beyond the 2.5% in Prop 2.5. My concern is that that puts an additional burden on residential taxpayers that I certainly would be concerned about. I do think, though, that this issue speaks to a lot of the work that we've talked about in this council, and I know Councilor Giannaco and Councilor Santos that you're doing around an economic and community development officer position. I think the more that we can do to increase the commercial tax base in town, the more that will help us with this issue that we probably talk about every year, because again, the commercial values haven't kept up. So as we think about the tax rate, that's one tool that we have in terms of raising revenue. The other tool is how do we make Wakefield a more attractive place for businesses? And I think over the long term, that is sort of the better place to spend our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Chines. Mr. Sentinello, if we could just go back to the average single-family tax bill, 2006 to present, that slide. I had noticed in going through it that towards the bottom where it says single-family parcels, 16, 17, 18 are rather flat. And then 19 and from 19 to 20, the parcels actually go down. And I was wondering if that is accurate, and if so, how that's explained.
Properties are always changing classes. For example, see a new condo building go up. Well, in the first year, if the master deed isn't recorded as of a particular date, that's called an apartment building. So you'll see classes of properties where things are parked until their full usage is able to be legally recognized. So you may have properties that were vacant land, 130s, that are going to become single families, but as of the date of assessment, they're not. And vice versa. You may have a house taken down, you may have a house in limbo. So those property, the property count numbers can and do change quite often. But it's not a dramatic change unless you have a new development come into the community or some type of devastation.
I guess I'm looking at it because I looked at it from 06 to 2020, and it's showing only 87 more parcels have come on, net.
Well, you're gonna have single families that may have been rezoned to condos, two families. It's, all that is our parcel count as of January 1st. January 2nd, something else could be there, and parcels move in and out of all property categories. I can't cite one example, but this is just one static picture as of January 1st. January 2nd, those numbers are gonna change, and so on and so forth.
So for people watching things like the new developments where we have new condos, for example, take like Wakefield Station as one example of that. Would each of those condos be considered a single-family parcel?
No.
How is that classified?
Condos are State Class Code 102.
Okay.
They're their own, so
Yep.
if I knew this question was coming, I would have brought a copy of our LA5 that details each and every type of property that we classify with their numbers,
Okay.
so.
So it's really, so when people are seeing the development, if it's a condo, it's not captured in these numbers, which would explain why the parcel number is pretty stagnant.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then I know that Vice Chair Santos had made mention too of the idea, and I know we've always talked about property values and increased property values being tied to tax increases. And so I went through from, doing the math on this, I went through from 06 through to the present. And if you look at, so the same chart here, the property values have, over that period of time, have gone up about 35%, but the taxes have gone up about over 86%. And so they're not really keeping pace, when you look at it from that perspective. So I think that's interesting for the council to understand, that we keep hearing, it's because of values, we keep talking about it. And I think we've all kind of, over the years, said, yeah, and I don't doubt the values are going up. But when you look at the values as compared with what the taxes are that homeowners are paying, they're not in line. I mean, a 35% value increase in your property value yields you an 86% increase in your taxes, and I think that's problematic. And I understand the argument about the homes being worth more, but for anyone living in their home, they don't realize that benefit until they sell. And so we have a lot of folks, that are
those people.
yeah, we have a lot of folks that are in more expensive or more valuable homes, but they don't realize that benefit. So I think it's something we need to be mindful of, because we're not entirely keeping pace here.
Due respect, it's important in any calculations to compare apples to apples. So in the example you cited, in looking at the various tax levies years, when did debt exclusions come on? When was debt retired? Things of that nature are going to impact your tax levy, because as I talked about earlier, the debt exclusion is above the tax levy rate. It's one of the hardest things when a new development's coming in. Victor, how much tax do we get in year 10? Geez, okay, I get my crystal ball out, get the dartboard and everything. No, I'm very dedicated in my approach. Here's what a levy is. Here's 2.5%. Historically, the town has done this, so this would be my estimated levy. Here's the historical chart of growth when I'm doing it. So, just to make sure in any comparisons are done apples to apples. Sometimes there's a grape in there, so.
I do think it's important that we be mindful, though, that there's not this simplified direct correlation that we in recent years have spoken about, because the numbers don't bear that out. I mean, property values are not keeping pace with the amount that taxes are increasing, on a percentage basis. And I think that's important for us. And it's you're running the numbers. I understand that picture. So you're coming here and just presenting it to us that way. I just think as a body we need to be mindful of that. And I agree, there are things. Things come on, things come off, certainly. But big picture here, if we're thinking about what the trend has been for taxpayers, it's been increases that are far in excess of what their property value increases have been, based on just looking at these numbers, in real dollars. Other question I had for you, and I know, Victor, we had spoke about this previously, and you were very kind to run some different scenarios. We sat down with Mr. Mayo as well. And I realized that this presents things at the max, 2.5. And I think because we can do something, that doesn't necessarily mean we should do something. We have free cash, Steve, as of tonight, about how much?
Free cash on July 1st was certified at $8.6 million.
So with $8.6 million, so my proposal for this body to consider would be considering a levy reduction, which in essence would be taking some of the free cash that we have available. 8.6 is a considerable amount. I know that at town meeting, Steve, some of that will be spent down.
Yes.
I know that we have financial policies in place, and I know, Victor, you're having run these different, levy points to see where we land on that. If we were to say come in between 400 and 500,000, that would represent some tax relief to all residents. And I think that is something that, given our financial position, we're in a strong financial position. We are meeting our obligations. We are funding our programs and services. And this is, money that's held in reserves. It's free cash. It's available to us. So it would not impact budgeting in any way. We've talked about the budgeting process. It would bring down our free cash, but that would also be replenished, Steve. I know that there are projections out relative to that, but there would be a replenishment there. So I would ask this body to consider what we'd be looking at, say if we were to look at maybe $400,000 from free cash to help reduce the tax levy. And Victor, do you have a sense of what those savings would look like?
If we were to pause the hearing and you were to take a vote that would reduce the tax levy by $400,000, the residential tax rate would go from $12.83 to $12.77. Commercial tax rate would go from $25.04 to $24.91. And at those average values that I cited, the tax savings for residential at $400,000 would be $33.35, and for commercial, $175.97 for your consideration.
sorry, excuse me, the $33 per year per household
For this 1 year,
for this 1 year, yeah. Just wanted to make sure it was 33
at
per.
the average value.
Got it.
And then if we were to do the 500,000, how would that compare?
The tax rate from the previous example would change 2 cents to $12.75. Commercial rate, $24.88. The savings for residential would be $44.47 and $216.58. Would you like me to cite some of the lower ones?
We can go through them all, but I guess my first question would be for Mr. Mayo. From your perspective, Mr. Mayo, I know that we had talked about this and you had looked at free cash projections out. What sort of an impact do you see that having relative to keeping within the parameters of our financial policies?
Well, first of all, let me say that unlike some of our other communities, it's interesting that we can even have this discussion in Wakefield. So I'm very proud of the work that Victor's done, Kevin Gill, John McCarthy, Kathy Kelly, we've done particularly the Town Council and the Finance Committee. To answer the question that Mr. Dombrowski asked, right now, free cash, or as of July 1st, is at $8.6 million. At the full tax levy, we would use $3.5 million to balance the budget. We have a couple of other items at town meeting that will most likely use free cash. And the reason why we use free cash in the November town meeting is because we've already set the tax levy in the spring town meeting, so this is coming in after all those numbers have been put in already to the Department of Revenue. So we would end the fall town meeting at about $4.9 million based on what's been presented. If we were to not go the full 2.5, and I'll use the $400,000 level because that's the first one that you brought out, that would bring us to about close to $4.5 million left in free cash after that meeting. I would feel that through what departments would return if they would hold serve like we've done before, and through local receipts, we probably would increase that up to about around the $7 million range, which would be within our financial policy of having 2 to 8% in our budget, in our free cash at the end of the year. And we would also have $3 million in the stabilization fund. So although that's not written in the policy, the Mayo comfort level is at $10 million. You didn't ask, but we would be in there. If the departments returned as they have over the last few years, and if the local receipts come in as we would project. So we would be within there. So we would end up the whole year with about $7 million in free cash and about $3 million in stabilization, which wouldn't change.
Then those numbers would be off by 100,000 for the.
They could be, off by 100,000.
But I'm saying, but for the 4 versus 500,000.
Yeah,
It's same,
right,
basically
right.
same numbers off
Right.
by 100,000.
Yeah.
So I'll open up to further discussion. My request of this body would be to consider not going up the full 2.5, based in large part on what has been discussed here, including the numbers that Mr. Mayo has just gone through in terms of what we have in free cash and stabilization. Further questions or comments? Councillor Butt.
Sure, Steve, can I just ask you some questions about
Yep.
the number of free cash? So we have an amazing AAA plus, whatever rating.
Yeah, we're AAA, yeah.
Right, AAA.
I'd like to go higher, but they don't have
Bond
that
rating.
one. Yeah.
And so this is factored into that decision, right? And we
Correct.
will have some big projects down the line, and I don't want to hinder that or affect our great bond rating. That is something else that other towns around us don't have.
Right.
So I want to be clear, like how bond rating is decided. It's based
Right.
on free cash and how much you have in stabilization.
Yeah, they look at a number of factors: free cash, stabilization, whether or not we're funding our OPEB obligations, which virtually no one else is doing, but we are. They look at our whole budgeting process, so it's one of the factors.
Yep.
Yep.
And we have been talking about future big projects that are going to be coming to town, right? Just
Correct. Future
potentially a
big.
new high school.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Okay. And then I just wanted to understand that better. And then Victor, I've sat here now 2 years in a row with you giving this presentation. What's your recommendation?
I recommend you pick something. Let me know.
Okay.
Try to shy away from that.
Okay. Smart.
Thank you. I think, Steve, we could clarify too, the bigger projects we're talking about, like the high school, that funding that's not a free cash issue. That funding is that's different.
Most likely, project that large, like the high school, would be a debt exclusion. Yep.
Councilor Shines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel strongly that this is a year where we need to look at going up the full amount of the 2.5% levy. I think there are a couple of reasons for it. One is we had a really productive meeting 2 weeks ago with the Finance Committee, with the School Committee, where we talked about our projections for the coming year, and every revenue projection we talked about was based on an increase in the levy of 2.5%. So from a budget standpoint, when we talked about thinking that we were probably going to end up at about a roughly break-even position for fiscal '21. If we are talking about taking 2.5 or taking some amount off the table, I think we're starting in a hole that would require us to dip into free cash again. This would be the third year that we've dipped into free cash to balance our budget, and that balance has gone down certainly since I joined the Finance Committee, and that concerns me for a couple of reasons. The OPEB obligations are one. While we're doing much better than most communities, we still have over $100 million in unfunded liability there between health and retirement that we need to be mindful of. Councillor Butt mentioned the capital projects that we're talking about. The high school probably would be a debt exclusion, but that's not the only project that we have on our plate. We've talked about the police department. We've talked about the DPW building. We've talked about some of the deferred maintenance in our other buildings that needs work. We've talked about the Greenwood. The list of projects is pretty significant. The lake is another one that you could add to that. That I think, as we think about our financial position, while it is good in one given year, there's a lot coming down the pipeline that we've got to be mindful of. The other thing that I think we need to be mindful of is if you look at where the global economy is, we are starting to see signs of slowdown. We've been very fortunate in Wakefield for the last 10 years or so, where we've had great new growth. State aid has been increasing, though not to the levels that it was prior to the Great Recession. We've seen increases in local receipts, particularly around excise taxes and so forth. All of those things have been helpful for us over the last 10 years. They've helped us in a position where we've been able to make these good decisions. We've been able to reduce the increases year over year in taxes. We've been able to make some of the investments. I'm concerned that is going to change a little bit in the next couple of years. And for me, I think it's important for us to be looking ahead, thinking about the future and thinking about how we assure that we maintain our financial position going forward. I know it's popular to vote for a lower increase. I look, though, at the numbers that Victor just walked through, and to say to the town that we're our townspeople, we're going to save you $3 a month, if that, on your tax bill. But we're going to have a $500,000 hole that we're going to have to plug, potentially by putting ourselves in a disadvantaged financial position next year or the year after the year after. I think that's something that we have to be mindful of, and so for that reason, to me, excuse me, this is the year where I would look at staying at the 2.5% increase.
Thank you, Councilor Shines. Any other comments or questions? Steve, I know that part of the tri-board meeting was talking about not just the projects that we're currently funding, but also what's coming off in the coming years. Can you just remind the public some of those projects? I know public safety being one of them.
Public safety building is coming off within the next 2 fiscal years. Woodville School is coming off within the next fiscal year. This is the last year of the Dole Bear. Library is off. Senior Center will be off next year. So we will have very few projects, other than new ones, left after that.
Councilor Smith-Galvin.
Just a informational question. Where are we on the senior, the circuit breaker? I believe it's still in the legislature. What's the status of that? Because that's an important component for certain populations.
Sent a letter to the Speaker of the House requesting his support in getting it out of committee. It is stuck in the, I think it's called the Revenue Committee right now at the House level, and for a bill that is revenue neutral to the House. I have no idea why it's not forward. But I requested Speaker DeLeo's assistance on it.
Thank you.
I would just remind this body that we are in strong financial position before we make this decision, and we would be in strong financial position following it. And I disagree that, you know, a $33 or $45 savings to people in this town won't have an impact. I think it will. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that we know that go to the food pantry, for example. You know, $40 is a shopping trip for an elderly, you know, couple. There is value in this, and we don't need to hold on to as much as we're holding on to. It's taxpayer dollars that we can give back to taxpayers. And when issues come up, we vote on them. When the high school comes up, absolutely, we'll have the taxpayers come out and they'll vote on that. And when the public safety building comes up, absolutely, you know, but those are going to be different projects. That's not free cash. Free cash is not going to be funding those projects. It can't. We don't have the sort of resources. That's not what free cash is. As Mr. Mayo said, it keeps within the confines of the policy that we have, but it offers people some relief. It's the taxpayer dollars, we're funding what needs to be funded, and we have this surplus. And at some point, we have to strike a balance. And I think that, you know, being able to reduce some of the increase that people are going to have helps to strike that balance. I think that's important.
Mr. Chair?
Councilor Chines.
You know, I agree that there are individuals in town that do need help and where, you know, $33 a year is meaningful. I am very supportive of doing things that are targeted, like the senior property tax exemption that we're trying to push through the House. I've been probably bugging, much to their dismay, our two members of the state legislature about getting that out of committee.
I don't feel too bad about it.
I don't either. You know, I would love to see this body think about ways in which we can be more proactive about doing things that are targeted in terms of tax relief, in terms of expense relief when it comes to, you know, utility bills. I mean, we own a town-owned utility. I mean, that gives us some license to think creatively about taking all of the ways in which people incur cost in town and all of the ways in which people receive service, and thinking about a way that we can mesh those together in a more strategic way that really targets those people in need. I am all for that. You know, my concern, though, about sort of making a broad-based decision that reduces the tax rate for everyone is, first of all, most of the benefit will go towards individuals that own the highest value properties in town. And from a policy standpoint, that's not something that I'm wild about. The second issue is, again, it is not something that we've prepared for in any of the financial planning that we've done so far. You know, it's something that we're having a discussion at the meeting, at the day that we're voting, without really thinking through the consequences and without really thinking through, is there a better way to achieve the policy outcomes that we'd like to. I think there is, and that's one of the things that I'd like us to focus on a body, as a body. But again, I feel that from a policy standpoint, you know, going below the 2.5% a year and spreading the relief all over every taxpayer in town is not the right approach to take if we're concerned about those folks that are struggling in town. We know that they're there and we should be doing more. Let's do something more that's targeted to those individuals.
And Councilor Chines, on that, I would say I don't think we can assume that those with the highest property, the highest valued properties are getting the greatest relief, because the average price is around $555,000. I think it's those properties that fall in that middle category that probably have seen the greatest increase in terms of property value, that have gone from, say, like $300,000 or $350,000 up to $550,000. I think if you're talking about a house that's, say, like $900,000, that may not have seen the same sort of increase, you know, so
But it'll see the same discount in their tax, you know, I mean, when we're talking about the tax rate, the tax rate applies times
tax rate
value.
applies across the board, but in terms of, you know, the differential, you know, what they've been feeling. I mean, I think you're seeing the folks in the middle valued properties that are getting far more squeezed with this, because they've seen their property values skyrocket. It's the people who have bought their first home, and they've moved into that, and they're raising a young family. Well, their home that they bought for, you know, $325,000 and put in a heck of a lot of sweat equity, you know, now has neighboring properties selling for $575,000, $600,000. Those are the people that I'm looking at here. And as I said, we're talking about from 2006 to the present, property value is only increasing by 35%, but taxes increasing by 86%. like, that can't be lost on any of us. I think, we're doing a disservice by not having, that better aligned. And I know that the assessor's office does a phenomenal job every year, and you are the numbers guy. You run the numbers for us. But at the end of the day, I think ultimately, we have an opportunity now to offer some tax relief to our residents, and if now is not the time to do it, then when is what it comes down to. Vice Chair Santos.
So I struggle with this because I understand what you're saying, Jonathan, with regard to looking at different kinds of programs to help those that are most in need. Of course, we should keep doing that, but the squawking I hear is from the, maybe just being a townie, the townies come to me, so the middle class mucka people who are just the working class folk who talk about us not cavalierly just raising taxes every year, and I know we don't do that, and I try to explain that, but they see the taxes going up 2.5%. Yet the $33 to me is for the vast majority of people who would see that is going to be a symbolic 33. It's not going to. I don't think it's going to help the vast majority of people. But I have a hard time saying in good. It's also symbolic to me to say let's not go up to the 2.5 in really good times. Just because we can, do we do that? I always fall back on Steve. If Steve's not comfortable with it, I will not do it, 100%. And to Maureen's point about the AAA bond rating, do you think this would hurt it, Steve?
I would say that always the more reserves you have, when any credit person looks at you,
Sure.
it's better. Do I think that there'd be an issue, would this be dispositive with everything else? If everything else holds serve as I project, no, I don't think it would be dispositive. If we were talking 2 million, then I might change it.
Sure. So I'm like walking a tightrope because I appreciate what Ed's saying, I appreciate what Ed's trying to do. But for what we're getting for it, is it worth it to me? Yet financially we are doing so much better than a lot of towns around us. So is it symbolic to townspeople to know that we're aware of the power we have, that we don't need to go to 2.5, that we are giving them back a little bit? I do think that's important as well. So I don't know. I'm still walking that tightrope.
Councilor Donaco.
Julie, have you spoken yet?
I asked a question, but go ahead.
Okay. Good.
We'll get to everybody, so.
No, I didn't know if she spoke for the first time or not, that's why. So, thank you. Victor, we've done this twice before already. We've not gone to the full 2.5%.
Actually enjoyed a period of several years in a row, leaving an estimated $3 million in the hands of taxpayers over the past 6-7 years.
And if you broke that down to a yearly amount, how much would that have been per year?
I think I had mentioned this in an email. The smallest years were, I think the first year we did it, was probably $300,000 on the table. It was a token of about $25. So
Right.
the range has been between 25 and maybe the high of 45.
Okay, so I too struggle at this point whether or not we should do it, but I mean, again, I'm on the fence. I'm always one that have supported Steve right along, year after year, on trying to make sure that we maintain a very healthy amount of money in various accounts where we've never had them before, upwards of 8-9 years ago. It was non-existent. We've done a lot of great work in this town to get them where they are today. We put money religiously into OPEB, where we never did it before. Free cash, I like to have the amount in there because even though it mostly goes back up to the 7-8 million amount, we never know what's gonna happen. We don't know what the economy is going to give us. We don't know if we're going to have a bad winter where we're going to have to take $1 million out of it, okay, for snow removal. That's non-recoverable at that point. I mean, we've been fortunate over the years. I can understand doing it. I voted for it twice. So it's hard right now to say, okay, we're doing the full shift to 1.75, which I'm going to have to concede to. But as far as the value now, 400,000, 500,000, it's a lot of money. But I don't know where we stand on this. I'd love to know what consensus of the board is right now, without having to take a full vote, but you can't do that. But I just don't know, Mr. Chair, at this point. I mean, I really, I don't know. I'm betwixt and between, as they say. And Victor's only looking for a number.
Give me a number.
Just give me a number. Steve, what do you, seriously, I mean, we've talked about this in and out, Steve, you and I. I mean, I've been on this board longer than anybody else, and I've started this whole process with you years ago. I've known what you've told me, and I've used it as religion, year after year after year, and put my faith into the point where we've gotten where we are because of your hunches and your, putting your money away into the piggy bank for future need. If you feel that we're...
What's your question? Two things. Number one is that, and I say this all the time, I am jaded. I mean, I was there in 2008 when we got the letter from the governor, or probably not from the governor, stating that we're cutting your state aid. We were in the middle of a project that they were funding. They cut that project. I had actually signed the contract for the project, and they pulled that out, so we had to do a lot of changes. But we've also adopted a policy. And if my hunches, you use the word hunches, not mine, if my careful analysis of the future, the way that I look at it in talking is correct, then we will end up the year within our levels, whether we go full levy or $400,000.
And you don't have a problem being in the 4.5 million range?
Well, we're gonna be there anyway.
Okay.
We're gonna be there close anyway. But remember, we measure free cash at the end of the year.
That's right.
All right, I know
Okay.
where it is. I know that there'll be, other revenue coming in. I know that our departments are very good about returning money. I know that all the budgets are set. Do I know that we're gonna have a horrible winter? No. But I think if that does happen, we'll probably get FEMA and or MEMA funds for that. And we've also taken steps to increase those budgets. So one thing we've done, along with keeping money in the hands of the taxpayer, that I'm very proud of, $3 million over the years, is we've also added and embedded amounts in the budget. So the 1.675 to 1.7 million that we put in OPEB every year, that's embedded in the budget, okay? That was a decision that the town council or selectmen at the time and finance committee made years ago when we jumped in the GIC. All of our projections include keeping the debt service fund at least the same, even if these projects go away, for a few years. So we'll build that up and then replenish them. So on that, I think we've done a lot of good things on the budget in that side. To what Councilor Chine said, I read a lot about the global economy. I look at inverted yield curve is something that's in my vocabulary I look at. So am I thinking about those things? Yes, I am. So I think about both ends of this. But I say that we have a policy that I think everyone has seen here. Either way, whether we go the full levy or not, we are within the parameters of the policy. So I guess that's all I can say. If all of my hunches are correct.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you. As this is as a public hearing, at this time, I'll ask, are there any members of the public looking to comment?
Julie?
Oh, I'm sorry, Julie, yeah.
Well,
Counselor Smith Galvin, I was going to come back to regardless, but Counselor Smith Galvin,
and
please.
I don't have a lot of time. I
No,
was gonna
please.
ask the same question,
Yeah.
Paul, as you, in terms of when was the last time we went up to 2.5%? And I think that it's a wonderful thing that we have left $3 million in the hands of the taxpayers. And not to belabor the point, but when I look at the meeting we had, the tri-board meeting, not all of our challenges are capital costs. You know, we need to build up our business development. We have unfunded liabilities, as you say. We've done a lot of work on Envision, and I find that, you know, keeping $33 in the hand, 33 to 45 in the hands, yes, I would love to do that, but I also think that by investing this money in our town, we're making our town a better place to live, and we're gonna do a lot of things, that, not to say we wouldn't be able to do with this, but it gives us some cushion, and, that's my opinion.
Seeing no further comment, then any comment from the public? Anyone wish to participate and offer comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll turn it back to the town council then. Counselor Chines.
You know, just one final comment. You know, sitting next to Mr. Mayo, I'm cognizant of how many times you use the word if. And I think that's a concern that I have. I articulated beforehand, but we've had an extraordinary run of good financial luck in this community, an extraordinary run. I mean, 10 years from sort of the days that I'm sure no one on this board or any of the other boards that make financial decisions for the town want to revisit. That will not last forever, and my concern again is that we are starting to see signs that could turn around potentially more quickly than we realize. I mean, that's certainly what we saw with the Great Recession. Again, given sort of all the challenges ahead of us, given all of the opportunities that we have to invest in the community, as Councillor Smith Galvin mentioned, if we put money in the right places like community and economic development that could pay dividends fivefold down the line, I think this is the time for us to sort of, use the money in a way where it can be deployed productively for the community. I think at the end of the day, that not only puts us in a better position when and if the economy changes and we start to see challenges, the likes of which we haven't seen for a decade, but it also, again, does allow us to invest in the things in our community, whether it's economic development, whether it's roads, whether it's buildings, that will help us maintain the standard of living, the expectations that residents have of the community of Wakefield.
I think it's important not to conflate some of the projects we're talking about. We all understand the need for something to be done with the high school. We all understand the need for something to be done with the public safety building. Those things will need to get done, but they are done completely independent of free cash. We are talking about $10 million right now. At what point is enough enough? And I think that we are meeting the needs of our residents. Can we do more? Of course. Are we expanding our budgets every year? Of course. If you look at the budget projections going forward, we're increasing those budgets. We're adding services. We're able to do that, and we historically have been able to do that, notwithstanding the fact that we have some people would say left money on the table, or not taking the full amount that we can take from taxpayers. It's the taxpayers' dollars, and if we're meeting the needs of the town with what we have, we shouldn't be taking more. And I think at this point, we're at a point where we have healthy reserves. We're talking about free cash that will be replenished. It's falling within our own economic policies, our fiscal policies. And if we're not doing it now, when are we going to do it? Times are good. We should be taking advantage of that. And I don't know how much more we're going to be scrolling away, at this point. And it seems like, there's never enough. And I understand that. I understand the perspective of, we can never have too much in reserves. Of course, we can never have too much available cash. Of course, we can never have too much money to do everything we want to do. Of course. But there has to be a balancing there. And at some point, when we're talking about improving the lives of our residents, we have to look at not just what we can do for them, but what they can do for themselves. And if they can use that $33 or $45 in a way that benefits their lives individually or their family, then they should be able to do that. It shouldn't be for us to tell them that, we're doing this on your behalf. And I think that gets lost in this. if we weren't able to, if we were level funding things, I completely understand. We're beyond that. We're going at nice clips, you know, most of our discussions are onward and upward, and what we're building into the budget. You know, Mr. Mayo and his team, they've gone through this. They've gone through the numbers. I've spoken with Mr. Mayo at length about this multiple times. He's spoken to, you know, Mr. Gill as well about this. We've gone through the numbers on this, and as he said, even with this, it still falls within our policies. So, with that, I will. Sorry, Councilor Bott.
I just wanted to clarify one thing, because my memory from a vote the whole town took at town meeting a year and a half ago, and then the ballot question was the public safety building was gonna be all free cash. So that was about $7 to $8 million of free cash. I know you and Steve and others, you know, the public safety building is still a priority. Chief Scory and others from his department have come in front of us and talked about it. It was all from free cash, right? Wasn't it? No?
No, it was city bonding.
No,
It would have been
bond.
bonded, but it would not have been a debt exclusion. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
which is-
yes.
yeah,
Bonded.
Yeah.
But I think that the point,
Counselor
though,
Chines.
is it would have come out of the annual operating budget, which ultimately free cash is effectively, at the end of the year, the difference between your expense, your revenue that you pull in minus your annual operating budget. So I think, Counselor Butt, you're right in that, you know, the financial position that we're in every year with our operating expenses, you know, and what that contributes to or takes away from free cash was very much going to be influenced by the public safety building.
Right.
I think at this point, though, when we're talking about what our fiscal policies are, we're at the high end of them. And so we're always going to have the scenarios you're talking about. You know, it's a very static, you know, government that we're running here. And so there's always going to be something coming on, something coming off. But we present now as best positioned to be able to make this kind of a decision. We've made this kind of decision, or this body has made this kind of decision in the past, to my understanding, with even less than ideal circumstances as are presented here today. So I think we can't lose sight of that. Further comment or question? Councilor May.
Okay. Besides having a vote pretty soon, because I think we wore everyone out, symbolism is important. I think Ian brought up a good point. If Phyllis was here, Phyllis would say, what are you guys, crazy? You don't have to take 2.5, don't do it. Simple as that. If it's 2 1/4 or 2.1, do the lower amount. It's not gonna affect the bond rating. I don't think we can do anything but vote for a lower amount. Don't do the 2.5. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor May. So at that, I'll actually make a motion. There are going to be 4 votes we have total. So I will make, the first motion is the setting of the minimum residential factor, the MRF. I will make a motion that we set that at a rate that accommodates a levy reduction.
No. Separate and independent. If you wish to proceed with the classification hearing, we can, and take those 4 required votes.
Right.
And then you could have a vote in the levy, or you could do it reverse.
Got it.
Have a vote on how much you would like to reduce the levy. The minimum residential factor is a constant. Contrary to popular opinion, you're not setting the tax rate, you're picking a factor. So why not proceed with the levy discussion first?
Fair
That
enough.
way I can announce my best estimate on tax rates.
Thank you, thank you. So with that, I'll make a motion to set the levy at $400,000 less than what maxing out the 2.5% would yield.
So moved.
So, all right, so moved by Councilor May, seconded by Vice Chair Santos, open for discussion.
Mr. Chair, and then through you, for Victor, just so
Councilor
I have
Bernard.
my numbers correctly, so with a $400 reduction of the tax levy, we are talking $1,271 for residential and $2,491 for commercial?
$1,277 residential.
$1,277
$2,491 commercial,
with a savings of $33.
$33.35 residential, $175.97 commercial.
Further comment or discussion? Seeing none, then, so the motion before you is to reduce the tax levy by $400,000, yielding a residential tax rate of $12.77. Do I have that correct, Mr. Sentinel?
An estimated,
Right,
an
estimated.
estimated residential rate of 1277 and an estimated commercial rate of 2491.
Right.
And Mr. Santillo, that's assuming we voted for.
A 175 shift and all the other things
Got it. So
remain
that's
constant.
not actually the tax rate until we vote on the other stuff.
Yeah,
Correct.
vote to reduce, and then it'll be factored into it.
And even then, it might be rounded.
Yes.
It might be a penny off, so, yeah.
Fair enough. So with that, seeing no further discussion, all of those in favor? See, we have Counselor May, Counselor Donaco,
I'm gonna
and,
abstain, but I won't, because that's courageless.
okay.
I still don't know. I'm still, I just, if I voted for it now, I will never vote for it again, even if, I shouldn't say that. Even if we're strong next year, I don't think we should do the shift, because I see the economy, as everyone else does, slowing down, but I also, you know, just a lot of people I talk to appreciate us not going to that full 2.5. So with a lot of hesitancy, I am voting for it this year.
So Counselor,
Not happily, either way.
Counselor May,
Yes.
Counselor Donaco, Vice Chair Santos, and Chairman Dombrowski. So that motion carries.
Do you need noes and abstentions?
I'm sorry?
Noes and abstentions.
I'm sorry, yes. All those opposed? 3, Counselor Chines, Counselor Smith-Galvin, and Counselor Butt. So the motion carries 4-3. So now, next, Mr. Sentinel.
Required vote would be the minimum residential factor that I previously quoted of 0.896750, which would achieve a 1.75 tax shift.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion as described by,
So moved for an MRF of 0.896750.
Counselor Chines. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Santos. Open for discussion. Counselor Butt, please. Counselor Butt, did you have a?
No, I was just
Oh,
asking
sorry.
Victor to put on the questions so we can all see them.
Got it. Any discussion or comments? Okay, seeing none, then the motion before you that's been seconded is to set the minimum residential factor at 0.896750. All those in favor? Seeing a vote of 7 council members, the motion passes unanimously. The next vote is the open space vote. I know you've already described that this is not applicable here in Wakefield, but nonetheless, we need to go through
Yes.
the motions of voting on it. So I'll entertain a motion relative to the open space vote. Just to confirm, Mr. Sentinello, we're voting to
Not
oppose.
Not to accept
Right.
provisions for an open space discount.
So with that, I will entertain a motion to not accept the discount related to the open space provision.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Counselor May. Any discussion? Seeing none, the motion before you is to not accept the open space discount, which, as described by Mr. Santinello, is really not applicable here in Wakefield regardless. All those in favor? Seeing a vote of 7-0, that motion carries. The next motion relates to the residential exemption. Again, this is something that is not applicable, Mr. Sentinel, here in Wakefield, as most residents most owners are
There's
most
only-
homes are owner occupied,
Yes.
basically. Yes.
Maybe just to clarify,
Counselor
it's not that
Chines.
it's not applicable, it's just that there aren't many households to which it would be applied, but it could
Right.
theoretically benefit a small number of homes, a small number of owners in the community.
At the expense of higher
Yeah.
priced
Right,
homes.
right, so.
But I
right,
think
it's-
this is different maybe than the open space where we don't think that there's a property that actually would qualify. There would be properties that qualify.
Oh, every owner-occupied property, residential property would qualify, but some of those, the higher end of the spectrum, might have their noses out of joint for paying for everybody else.
Thank you, Councilor Chines, for that clarification. So yes, so there would be some applicable properties here, not a large number from what Mr. Santinello has said, but as you described, were we to approve this, then it would have shifted the burden further onto the other taxpayers. All right. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to not accept the residential exemption for here in Wakefield.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Chine, seconded by Counselor Donaco. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, the motion before you is to not accept the residential exemption for properties here in Wakefield. All those in favor?
Aye.
With a vote of 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. And our fourth vote relates to the small commercial exemption. As Mr. Santinello described this already, this is an exemption for buildings not exceeding $1 million, and one business in the building cannot qualify. The entirety of them would need to, and the exemption goes to the building owner, not the business itself. So with that understanding, I will entertain a motion to not accept the small commercial exemption for taxes.
Move to decline the small commercial exemption.
Thank you, Counselor Chine. Do I have a second?
Second.
Counselor, or Vice Chair Santos, any discussion on this? So the motion before you is to decline the small commercial exemption. All those in favor?
Aye.
With a vote of 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Mr. Santinello, for all of your work always on this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Anyone has any questions, you know where to find me half the time.
We do.
And I should point out, too, that we have, our next item agenda is actually an update being provided from the Board of Assessors. So I believe you both are providing that, is that right?
I can go through it real fast if you like.
Please.
Unfortunately, my chairman was unable to attend tonight. Yano, he's been under the weather. But basically, our Board of Assessors is comprised of 3 elected folks. We have Sebastian Yano Tyne, who's a legend in the profession. He's been in the assessing field for well over 30-plus years, and is former past president of the Massachusetts Association of Assessing Officers, and is still involved in various committees in assessing, and he's also an appointed assessor in North Reading. Jane Daddario has been on the board for over a decade. She's earned her Massachusetts Accredited Assessor Certificate, and has done really well by us, the board. And Brian Donegan is our newest member. Brian's a former Middlesex County Assistant DA with prosecution and civil defense litigation experience, and he's now in the private sector locally. And Brian's working to obtain his MA designation as well from the state. Here's our year in review and basically how we work. Actual tax bills are mailed at the end of December. Assessing staff receives, process, researches, and inspects all abatement applications. Typically, we get around 50 or 60 abatement applications yearly, down from when I first began, 400 plus that were waiting for me. We meet in mid-February to begin adjudicating those applications that have been fully prepared by staff, myself, by Assistant Scott Morrison, who's sitting in the back, and Kirsten Evans, who's really the boss of the office, and keeps both of us doing what we're supposed to. I present each application at the meeting, make recommendations based on observations. You go into a house, we may have it listed as very good, it's only average. We may have 2.5 baths, there's only 2. I may walk in your house and find a finished basement, but I'm not gonna tell you about that. I'm just gonna sneak it on the following year. But these are all the things that we do. So we make recommendations for the board, what to do with the application. Sometimes there's lively discussion. Sometimes it's, okay, fine. So we meet a few times, February, March, and April to adjudicate abatement applications. In July, we meet to discuss pending appellate tax board cases. Sometimes commercial property owners I get a sad emoji when they're denied by our board and they seek refuge at the appellate tax board, so we have to prepare for some of those and see what our strategies will be. Also, in July is when I start looking at, I give my board a recap of the sales. So I say, okay, here's where we are. Here's where the sales indicate we need to go, and here's what the state says where we need to be on those levels. So that's when I begin describing to them what I'm gonna do to change things. Then we pretty much have the summer off, unless a case comes up where we have to make a decision. Maybe I have an appellate tax board case coming up in September. I may need the board in July and August to discuss various either settlement or fight options. In September, the board meets, we talk about various changes I made to valuation and tell them, you know, this went up, this went down, or whatever the case may be. And we usually have lively discussions about that. And we also talk about first steps for classification, what we're gonna do to present it, does anything change significantly, any major shifts we experience, anything like that. And throughout the year, the board stops by regularly to sign departmental paperwork. And around this time of year, they'll pop in whenever we have a bunch of statutory exemption applications. Senior statutory exemptions, veterans, things of that nature, those are all signed off by the board. So rather than doing it at a meeting where they're signing 300 applications, at their convenience, they come in, they sign, stamped, approved at a subsequent meeting. Pretty much what we do. Nice and quiet behind the scenes.
Great, thank you very much for that. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Santinello?
Mr. Chairman, just real
Yes.
quick. I have a question that's more for the public more than anything else.
Sure.
If someone sought an abatement, typically, the taxpayer would have to file what time of the year, what?
The time frame to file is from when you receive the actual tax bill, which is the one that goes out at the end of December, and you have until the due date of that bill, which is typically February 1st. But in my years, I found that when I tell people, you have until February 1st, they come barreling in February 5th. So while I go through that, I tell them, don't forget, just come in January. Get here in January. I got a feeling they'll remember the month better than they will a specific target date.
So January is the month that we should tell them that they should go seek an abatement if they feel that they.
If they feel they're overvalued.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? All right.
Got me in the hot seat, bring it on. Nothing else?
So that actually blended
Sorry,
into.
Mr. Chair, maybe just to put in a plug, I mean, one of the things that Mr. Santinelli's office does is publish a really helpful brochure on the tax abatement and relief programs and all of this information. And so I think maybe just for the public is, you know, a plug that the information is actually out there in a very convenient pamphlet form that, you know, certainly is something that can help people figure out sort of what they might be eligible for and what their opportunities might be.
Thank you for that. And also a couple times a year, I'm at the Senior Citizen Center, and I was going through that application, the guide that I have there. Little woman got ahead of herself and said, what do I have to do to qualify for a surviving spouse exemption? Having a dead spouse, and pretty much they laughed, so I was good at that. And they didn't throw tomatoes at me this time.
Victor, just one last,
Yeah.
your name has been pronounced 3 different times, 3 different ways on this board. Can you please, for the benefit of all of us?
Santinello.
Santinello. Got it. Oh, at the end.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
everyone.
Victor.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you both
evening.
very much. And just to address the formality that bled into our public hearing, but I would entertain a motion to now close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Donaco, seconded by Vice Chair Santos. We'll do a roll call vote. Councilor Chines.
Yes.
Councilor May.
Sorry.
Councilor Smith Galvin. Vice Chair Santos.
Yes.
Councilor Donaco. Councilor Butt and Chairman Dombrowski. Yes. 7-0. The public hearing is now closed. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Moving on now, item number 9 on the agenda is the regular town meeting warrant. Our first evening of town meeting is Monday, the 18th of November. We have the warrant before us this evening. There are a few items on the warrant that I believe we have Mr. Conway here.
Fees, item A.
I mean, if we, Mr. Chair, if we want to take it out of order, just so Mr. Conway doesn't need to stay late, we can come back to it.
Item. Right, I was just giving the overview. Right, we're doing A first.
We're doing A first, okay.
Yeah, exactly, yes. Actually, because Mr. Conway's here, why don't we do B and C first, and then we'll come back to A, because that'll be Councilor Chines. So, good evening, Mr. Conway.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Nice to be here tonight.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. Conway, we have 2 items, item 9B and item 9C,
Yes.
that you'll be speaking with us
Yes.
this evening about.
Yep.
9B being Walton Lane betterment article.
Yep. So what I have before you tonight, Public Works is proposing to warrant articles to go to town meeting this fall. And the first one being a betterment on Walton Lane, and presentation's up. So if you want to follow along, I'll just quickly go through the presentation. This is something that couldn't have come out more perfect. This is a citizen's petition for a betterment, and all of the abutters voted unanimously to take this project on and divide the costs equally. It's kind of the perfect scenario as far as these go. But Walton Lane is on the eastbound side of Lowell Street, roughly between the intersections of Main Street and Pleasant Street. And just quickly, I know we've been through this before, but I'm not sure that everybody at home has seen this. Wakefield's private way bylaw. So upon the petition of a majority of the abutters on a private way, betterments may be assessed upon the owner's estates which derive a particular benefit or advantage from making such repairs on any such private way. And it says such assessments shall be the sum equal to the cost of such repairs and in proportion to the frontage on such way. A little bit of the procedure to this point. The petition was signed by the majority of the abutters. I believe it was 11 out of 17, which you'll see in the next slide. That has made it to the Public Works Engineering Division, and we have established a scope and cost estimate. From that point in time, it is presented in front of the Advisory Board of Public Works. If the majority of the board approves, then an approval to proceed is given by the folks looking to do this project, and we get to step 3, which is where we are right now with the town council. And basically with this, the majority of the abutters vote in favor of the betterment, which we have in this case. The betterment is submitted to the town council as one of the proposed articles for the upcoming town meeting. If you all choose to vote in favor of the article, it will be sponsored on the warrant. From that point in time, we'll make it to town meeting, where the article will be presented and the body will be asked to provide a vote. Payback time frame at that point in time will be included in the article, along with an estimated assessment. At that point in time, an interest rate based on variable funds or source of funding will be explained as well. After the fact, an order estimating betterment is put together. The document is brought back to the council for final approval and signature within 120 days of town meeting approval. Next step, order estimating betterment. The document is recorded at the Registry of Deeds within 30 days of the council vote. Construction funds will become available July 1st in the new fiscal year. We'll get out there and do the construction that's promised in the scope of work. And then there'll be a closeout where we come back to the council and we go through the motions to make sure that it goes onto the tax roll and payments start to come in. Quickly on the map here that you see in front of you, all these houses shaded in green were the original petition signers. There's about 2/3 had signed originally to bring this forward and start this plan rolling. There's a couple of pictures of the street right here. If you're looking down Walton Lane from Lowell Street, you can basically see that the whole top course of the road has failed. It's starting to get into the sub-base. It's much past its probably intended service life. And just another view from the other direction, which basically showing us the same thing. This street's probably well beyond repair, and it's a good time for this to be addressed. And this is just another thing, shot of the same thing. Part of the scope of work here will also be doing some ADA accessibility ramps at the intersection of the way and Lowell Street. These will be designed and surveyed so that they meet any standard that needs to be met for construction. Our scope of work with this, the estimated cost is around $91,000. This will include a roadway survey. It will reclaim and pave a 15-foot wide roadway, 800 feet long. When we say reclaim, this will be completely pulverized and reshaped, regraded, and rebuilt. It'll be replaced with a 2-inch binder course, which is your base, and a 1.5-inch wearing top course of pavement. This will also have some crushed stone installed along the roadways and the 2 curb ramps at the intersection of Lowell Street that we spoke about before. Before any of this work starts, we'll also do any investigation to any of the underlying utilities that might be needed, and if they need attention or need to be replaced, that will be done before any of the road work begins. The approval to proceed signatures, like I said, all 17 have signed on to this, and all of the abutters approved that it will be divided up into equal shares over 20 years. And this next slide is just some of the breakdown of the cost share by residents, and that's about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conway. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Conway?
Good job.
It's a no-brainer.
Just a quick question, just to clarify.
Counselor Chines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The cost that's assessed to the abutters includes the 2 ADA ramps?
Correct. It'll
So
be-
even though those are sort of, I guess, technically town-owned sidewalks, the replacement of the ramps goes to the stakeholders in the private way?
At that point in time, I would have to verify that with engineering, whether that's in the scope.
Okay.
If that's something typically that we would pick up, we would pick it up with this street. It was not picked up in the Lowell Street work.
Mhm.
The time to do it would be now, while we're actually in the intersecting way.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Okay, seeing none, why don't we take them then one vote at a time? So, just to be clear, this would be an article that would be added onto the warrant by the town council. So our vote represents an endorsement of this request. All right, so with that in mind, I'll entertain a motion for the Walton Lane Betterment article as described by Mr. Conway.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor Donaco. Any discussion? Seeing none before, the motion before you is the Walton Lane Betterment article as described by Mr. Conway to be added to the regular town meeting warrant. All those in favor?
Aye.
Seeing a vote of 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. That will be added to the warrant. I should point out, that is identified as Article 10 on the warrant currently. Mr. Conway, if you could next talk about the sewer enterprise article.
So the purpose of me coming in front of you with the sewer enterprise article here, the purpose of this article is basically an accounting function providing for appropriation from retained earnings to balance the fiscal 19 budget. If you remember in the springtime, in the capital article, the sewer enterprise capital was funded out of receipts. This would switch that from receipts to be taken out of the reserves. The short answer to this is it's a language change so that we can accomplish that. It probably should have been something that we did in the springtime, but by the time that was realized, the warrant was set in motion, and we knew that we would have to come back to this next step.
Any initial questions for Mr. Conway? Councilor Donaco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe, what are we talking for money?
$425,000 from the reserve,
425,000?
correct?
And that's typically in the past been coming out of receipts, and now we want to take it out of reserves.
It's typically been coming out of either or. For the purpose of this one, we chose a couple of the things that we had in the capital article. Typically, we would finance them out. We chose to pay for them up front and not have to finance them and not incur any interest. With that being said, in the beginning of this, we probably, again, the language should have said that it was taking out of the reserve, and it didn't at that time. So this would be to correct that.
Mr. Chair, back to you. My concern is now that there's another 425,000 going to be allocated from reserve instead of from receipts. So it's more money out of the reserve account that we're talking about. If it's going back and forth, 1 year's receipts, 1 year's from reserves, which one is it going to be going down the road? Is it going to come out of receipts more often than reserves? And how is that going to impact down the future? I think it's a legitimate question.
Mr. Mayor, did you want to speak to that first?
Yeah, this is a different reserve. This is the sewer reserve, not free cash or
Okay,
that.
so-
My
Okay, so
apologies.
that's.
I should have
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine, no, that's
Yeah,
fine. So now
that's
that's
exactly why the
clarification
question was
on my
asked,
part
yeah.
now,
This
too.
is solely out of the enterprise, the
Okay,
sewer
out of the
so this is
enterprise
sewer
account.
reserve.
Sewer reserve, yes.
Not-
This does
Yes,
not affect
exactly.
the
Thank
tax
you.
levy.
Yeah.
So you're taking it from.
And sometimes we'll take it out of reserve, sometimes we'll take it out of receipts.
But the receipts is from the sewer reserve.
Receipts
sewer-
would be the sewer receipts.
Right, okay,
Right,
out of the.
right, versus the sewer
okay,
reserve.
now I understand.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Thank you.
That's okay. My apologies.
Clarification.
I should have clarified.
No, that's fine. As long as I have the right information in front of me, that's all that matters. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, then I'll entertain a motion relative to the sewer enterprise article as Mr. Conway has described.
So moved.
Second.
So The motion that was made by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor Donaco, is for the transfer of $425,000 from the sewer reserve fund to be added as an article on the town meeting warrant for November 18th, 2019. All those members in favor?
Yes.
Okay, seeing a vote of 7-0, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Conway. We appreciate your guidance.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Now we'll jump back up to item 9A. That is the fees article. This is a proposed article that would end up on the warrant that would change the policy regarding licensing fees here in town. I believe I'll turn it over to Councilor Shines to go through this.
So actually, I'll defer to Mr. Mayo to introduce him, and I'll have a couple of comments after.
This summer, we decided we would take a look at all of the fees. We actually took a look at the fees for some of our licenses that we grant a couple of years ago. And this really came out of a conversation with Councilor Chines at one of these meetings that, there were a number of people that applied late for applications. It created a lot of problems, and we were hustling and trying to get things done so they could continue with their business. And we talked about actually having a late fee, and that's part of the process in here. But while we're doing it, we decided to look at these fees in general that haven't been changed in, I would say, a good 20 years. And we looked at some of the licenses fees. We are much more active in looking at these licenses, particularly in liquor and common victual license. We are very stringent. Not that we weren't before, but we're more proactive now, and we take a great look at these licenses. So in a nutshell, these licenses that have stayed the same for 20 years are looking to change and increasing, we'll start from the beginning, a $100 application fee for all applications with the exception of a one-day liquor license. The reason why this is important is because there's a lot of work that is done on applications. It goes to multiple departments, multiple disciplines that look at this, from police, board of health, building, believe it or not. And $100 as an administrative fee, and particularly our office, Sherry handles all that, is certainly not onerous to look at that. One-day liquor licenses, no, the fee for that is only gonna be $100. We wouldn't charge that for those anyway. Increase for an all alcohol license from $3,000 to $4,500. This is your restaurants, bars, and what have you. We looked at that, and I'm sure Councilor Chines will talk about that. That hasn't changed for a long time. And I might point out that in your package is a survey of our surrounding cities and towns, among some others that chimed in here. And we're really looking to try to kind of get better into this level here, but also to be somewhat of a trailblazer, because looking at a lot of our neighbors, they haven't looked at these in 20 or 25 years themselves and are kind of waiting to see what we do, which is fine. An increase in a beer and wine license, again, these would be restaurants that only have beer and wine, from $2,400 to $3,000. Package store licenses from $2,000 to $2,500. Club liquor licenses from $500 to $1,000. One-day liquor license we talked about from $50 to $100. Class 2 licenses, and these are the licenses that come in front of you, people to pick up the used cars, to sell them from $100 to $200. That is a statutory maximum of $200. Common victual license from $25 to $100. Fortune teller, and they should see this coming, from $50 to $100. I didn't get the laughs. I didn't get the laughs. I thought there was a delay, right? Thank you.
In fairness, I've heard Mr. Mayo
He's
tell
heard
this
it, I
joke
know,
a
he's
number of
heard it
times.
before. Auctioneer from $10 for an auctioneer's license to $200. That, lodging houses from $50 to $200. Peddler from $50 to a $200 flat fee, and nothing for additional employees. These are people, the people that are selling slush and what have you, that we license here in Wakefield. They would get $50, and every employee they added, they should add another $50 per employee. We're never gonna know whether they added all these employees. We do know that they have this stand. So that seems to me something much easier to handle. Secondhand dealer license from $125 to $200. Livery to $200 per vehicle. Entertainment and auto amusement to $100 per device. It's currently $50 per device. And master fire alarms, which is your commercial fire alarms, from $225 to $300. That has not changed in a long time. In fact, I couldn't find that anywhere in the bylaw, so we're adding it. And That actually would bring in about $52,500 on its own. We're charging $225 now, and rates are all over the place from a low of $200 to $1,200 per master fire alarm. And what happens is our firefighters go out when these alarms are pulled, and that happens quite often, and they check them and what we're doing. To be fair to our business owners and to the fact that these licenses are already coming in for next calendar year. These are all calendar year, not fiscal year. These would be operative as of January 2nd, 2021. So there'd be a whole year for the businesses to look at this because they're already bringing them in now. We don't want to go chasing for checks. I think this is a long time coming. We want to do a great thing for our community. This would add between $40,000 and $50,000 to our local option receipts. I think it's something that we should do. We've worked hard on this. Councilor Chines has worked hard on this and may want to say a few words here too. And Sherry's done a lot of work in really chasing down these other communities who weren't always so quick about giving their information, which I don't quite understand because we're all here to help each other. But so with that, I think Mr. Chines may have to want to say a few words.
Mr. Chair,
Councilor
if I
Chines.
can make a couple of comments. First of all, thank you to Mr. Mayo and Mr. Mullen, and particularly to Ms. Dalton for all the work that went into this. In Sherry's case, not only is it work on this particular proposed warrant article, but also just on the processing of the licenses on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it is, I have a new appreciation for how much work goes into that, and so thank you to Sherry for doing a great job. You know, a couple of things that I want to comment on. First, Steve mentioned this really started with an effort to think about how do we create an enforcement mechanism to get license applications in when they are expected. We did not have any ability to leverage a late fee in the town's current bylaws. My understanding is that if there were any recourse we wanted to pursue, the recourse would be to basically deny a business to the right to operate, which seems incredibly extreme for a late application. And so where this really started was trying to give the town council some ability to effectively back up the town administration in terms of collecting this information and getting all of the businesses licensed. That's where the late fee comes into play. I think our hope is that that is a mechanism to encourage people to submit their license applications on time. I think to me success is we don't actually collect the late fee or have reason to for any business. I want to speak a little bit about the magnitude of some of the increases. Certainly on a percentage basis, the increases are significant. I think, though, that's a reflection of the fact that we haven't looked at these fees in over 20 years. And so if you assume that we updated them 20 years ago and just take basically 2.5% in inflation every year, what we're proposing in many cases, particularly for the larger and more sort of onerous fees on the alcohol licensing side, are actually below what the fees would have been if we just let them rise with inflation every year. So certainly big increase in one year, but again, when you think about sort of how inflation has played out, we're still below that. And I think one of the things that's important to recognize is while the work has changed over the last 20 years, or while maybe some of the work hasn't changed in terms of the processing time, what has changed is that we are doing more enforcement. We're doing more compliance checks. We heard about that from the Board of Health in a prior meeting. We heard about that from Wake Up. And so we are, as a town, doing a lot more to make sure that our alcohol licenses are being used appropriately and establishments that we've licensed are following the law. And so I think with the inflation piece that we saw, plus that increased compliance force, I think the increases in the fees are justified. Again, recognize that that is a big increase in one particular year. In light of that, as Steve mentioned, we are looking for this to take effect as of January 1st, 2021. So businesses have more than a year to plan for and budget that. We also did share this with some folks from the Chamber of Commerce, and I know they did with their board members as well. And while I certainly don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, the general sort of reaction we got was one that was, I would say sort of grudgingly supportive. It wasn't something where, the executive director of the chamber or the board members that got back to him felt that this was something that they were just out of line opposed to. So I think for Wakefield, this is really an opportunity for us to bring our fee structure as well as bring the opportunities that the late fee presents to a place where it is appropriate and where it is sort of in line with the level of work and the level of effort that goes in. I'd encourage the folks on the council to support this and hope we will at town meeting as well.
Vice Chair Santos.
2 questions. The increase in all alcohol, that's the one that jumped out at me from 3,000 to 4,500. Not that I think that 4,500 is, I don't know that I agree that we need to go up 2.5 and it's less than inflation. I don't know that Wakefield should be where Andover and Saugus are. Now, maybe they haven't raised their rates. Maybe they will raise it too, but if we're looking at towns that are more closely aligned with the type of businesses, the restaurants Wakefield has, I see us more like the Reading or the Melrose. Melrose is a little low. Lexington. But, so that concerns me a little bit.
We looked at that.
Yeah.
And Jonathan and I talked about that. And based on, what's going to happen is it's going to be a pass-through. Let's all face it. Your business costs go up. You pass it through to the consumer.
Right.
Okay. Based on the $1,500,
Yeah.
we felt that based on 100 drinks a day sold, 300 days a year.
Yeah.
Now, probably going to be more than 100, and they're probably open more than 300 days a year.
Right.
It would add a nickel.
Okay.
So it wasn't a huge amount, number one. Number two, Linfield, which is looking at, that hasn't looked at theirs for 20 years, is at $4,250.
Oh, they are,
So
okay.
we're like right there.
Sure, okay.
With them. Burlington, which is not an abutter of ours, but is beyond me with all of their construction.
Right.
Why they haven't looked at that. In fact, when
Yeah.
we talked to them, they were very interested in what we had because they think it should be
Okay.
changed because of all going on.
So you think a
there.
lot of these towns will
Oh,
likely
yeah.
follow where we're
Melrose
going?
hasn't looked at it in years,
Okay.
Reading, years. In fact, they said, let us know what happened. Although Reading, we're pretty close to them anyway. Saugus is much higher. Stoneham, years ago, again, they're
Okay.
higher. I think we're in good stead.
Good.
I think.
No,
Yeah,
I
but I
trust
think maybe just to add to that, I mean, the fact that, we are actually below Saugus,
Yeah.
Saugus, Stoneham, Reading, Linfield, Lexington, and they haven't looked at those fees in umpteen years. I mean, I don't think we're out of range of what a business would expect by going up to the 35, or, 45.
Okay.
Vice Chair Santos.
It's a 3-parter, the quick ones. Auctioneer, so, never thought I'd say that word at a town council meeting.
Yeah.
But I would assume most of that would be for nonprofit.
No, you may have somebody come in and do an estate auction, and they
Okay.
rent a room at the Sheridan.
Sure,
To
okay.
do that. We have very few of those. I can't remember the last time
Okay.
we've had one of those come in.
Sounds good. And then my last question is, at some point, will we look at the fees we charge for the use of our lake or that kind of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because that
That'd be a
needs to be looked
separate,
at.
that's a separate item.
Separate
Yeah.
item, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Donaco.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at this, I understand where you'd want to make the jump on the restaurant, even though I feel that it is steep going up 1,500. My concern would be to the small amount of clubs that we have in the town, jumping up a full 100% from 500 to 1,000. That's a lot of alcohol for a club to have to serve to its membership. And if the membership is small, I think that's going to impact them greatly on some of the smaller clubs. So I think that large of a jump on the clubs alone is going to be. The only one that may be, not even feel it would be someone like the Elks or maybe the 3Cs. I don't know what the other two.
Well, the only clubs that we have are the Elks, the 3Cs,
West side.
the West Side, and the
Knights.
Knights.
The west side.
Because Mason doesn't have alcohol.
Correct.
So the smaller clubs, I think that's, being a member of a few, I know that that's going to impact their bottom line, especially if they don't have many members attending. So it's tough doing it to a club. I mean, but that's my bit on that, because there's no, unless the members are going to drink more, and if that's what we're promoting for the members to drink even more, that's a different story, but that's who's going to make up that cost. It's not going to be the public going in, it's the members only.
Yeah, I'm confident they'll be fine.
So I don't know, that's just my 2 cents on the club one. I mean, you've jumped on almost all the rest of them as far as the alcohols are concerned. But I found it strange that we went up high on the all alcohol, but we didn't go up on the liquor stores larger than we did. Because there's more volume on the liquor stores than there is on the restaurants. So, I don't know. It's, the argument was on alcohol, but I didn't understand the point when you didn't raise it on one, but you raised it on the smaller ones. I don't know, I think 500 to 1,000 was a big jump for the clubs. But that's my opinion on that.
Any further questions or comments? Councilor Smith-Galvin.
Not on the specific rates, but just, given that we're doing this in 2021, and I know that we've already talked about being better automated with applications and getting online payments, I just think that that's probably a good goal to roll those out at the same time. I know that's already in the works before this, and it's not necessarily tied to it, but I definitely think that we still have a ways to go of not only updating the licenses, but updating our process and our online process.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, it was,
Further questions or comments? Councilor Butt.
mine was doing what Councilor Smith-Galvin said, was that it's such a great goal if these are going into effect 2021 to have online and no more people filling out paper and dropping it off. So I think that's, working with the IT department, I think it's a great goal. I also, I appreciate this memo, and I appreciate the $40,000 to $50,000 added. Is there a way just to give quick numbers of how many licenses this actually, I appreciate hearing that it's 3 that are in the club liquor licenses, but it would have been helpful to kind of have those numbers.
All right, we have 5 package store licenses. Off the top of my head, I would say 20 to 22 all alcohol license. Very few beer and wine left.
3, I think.
3 beer and wine left. 5 package store. One day liquor, we don't know, we're not changing them. Common vic, which are your,
We have, oh God, I don't know, probably 80, maybe?
80 to 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. Entertainment, it then depends on how many
Yeah, probably have
devices
20 of
they
those.
have.
Yeah, right.
Auto amusement, I think we have 1 or 2 places that have those.
Yeah,
Maybe-
we have a
maybe
we have a
few more.
handful probably of
handful.
those, yeah.
Class 2, again, they come in all the time.
Yeah.
Livery, very few.
Mhm.
Fortune teller, I think we had 1.
We have 1.
We have 1. Lodging houses, really just a couple of
Couple.
those.
Mhm.
Peddlers, very few now.
Right.
Most of them go through the state.
Mhm.
Very few come into the cities and towns. And
So-
secondhand dealers, 2 or 3.
No, we probably have a handful.
We have 5? Maybe
Yeah.
up as many as 5?
Mhm.
Yeah. So really, the main ones are gonna be the alcohol licenses.
And if they go through the state, sorry, just to,
Counselor.
if they go to the state, they don't have to
No.
go through us?
No, they have to at least come to the Board of Health to get checked out, but then they have a state peddler's license, they can go anywhere in the state
Yeah.
if they want. We get nothing.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another question? Councilor May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, a couple comments. Great work. I think we're catching up, or we should catch up, but I think Councilor Giannaco and Councilor Santos mentioned a couple of things. Even though the 3,000 to the 4,500 is in line with other folks, I think it's extremely high to go 50%. I can see maybe a 20 in a year going up in January, not 50%. I don't care what we didn't do 20 years ago. Well, we should have thought about that then. You can't jack up 50% on businesses. Do 20, something reasonable. Paul's Club Point, 100%, it's way too much. Just use 20 as like a max. I understand going from $10 to 200, special situation, but I don't think it's fair to businesses to go 3,000 to 4,500. I don't care what Andover's doing. I don't care what they're doing in Washington, D.C. I care less. the businesses here, we're gonna hurt them, and 50% is too extreme. So overall, I think it's good work. But I think there's a few pops here. The all alcohol, the clubs, don't hit them with 100%, 50%. You know, they have a year notice, it's not right. Businesses, everyone's hardworking, everyone's trying to make a buck, keep the business together. In theory, most of it was great work, but these are two areas where we shouldn't do that. You know, go from 3,000 to 3,600. Go from, 500 to 600. So tweak it. I think that's fair, but don't whack someone 1,500. I don't care if they're a small restaurant, big restaurant. It's just not right. So that's it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor May. Councilor Chines?
Sure. Just in response, thank you,
Sure.
Mr. May and Mr. Donaco. I think from my perspective, I hear the point on the club licenses, and given that these are, sort of nonprofit civic organizations, I'd certainly be amenable to going to, 750 or whatever the right number is, recognizing that is higher. I will say that's probably one of the ones that if we go to 1,000, we are outpacing inflation by a little bit, and so I think that's consistent with the approach that we were taking there. I do think on the alcohol licenses, I do feel that the 4,500 is appropriate, again, recognizing that it's a large increase. But when you look at the volume of business that a restaurant with a full liquor license can do, I actually don't think that the $1,500 per year is that material. I think if that's sort of the difference between staying in business and not for a restaurant in town, there are probably larger problems than the fee. Again, I also go back to just the added effort that we've put into enforcement and compliance, and the very real sort of public health and public policy reasons why we do that. As reasons why I think the 4,500 is supportable. But, I hear your point, and I think, it's, no one likes raising fees in any circumstance.
It shouldn't.
But again, what we wanted to do is make sure we were reflecting both the level of work and sort of the costs incurred to do those. But, again, hearing, both Mr. May and Mr. Donaco, when we get to the point in time to make a motion, I would be comfortable amending, the proposal so that the club liquor license is something for 1,000.
So,
Councilor May.
So, again, I appreciate your comments. My opinion is 1,500 is way too much. We shouldn't be the ones telling the businesses, oh, it's not that much, you're making a ton of money, we want more of it. This is wrong. 1,500 is way too much. 20% on these larger ones. Go from 500 to 6, go from 3,000 to 3,600. I don't care what it is. 1,500 is too much. We shouldn't be telling the businesses they owe us because we didn't do it for the last 20 years. So, thank you.
Thank you. I should first thank Ms. Dalton. You've done a great job in putting all this together. I know there's a lot of work, a lot of calling to get this information down, and so I want to make sure that she's recognized for all that she's done. I think you also, Councilor Chines and Mr. Mayo as well. One of the concerns that I have is the rather arbitrary nature of these increases. I've not heard much rationale behind the jumps that we're talking about. I think to Councilor May's point and to Councilor Donaco's, the 50% increase for an all-alcohol license, for example, there's not been much of a justification for that. Going from, $25 to $100 for common victular license, same thing. An auctioneer going from $10 to $200. Why that kind of an increase? So I'd like to know a bit more of the rationale behind, because there may be certain things where the master fire alarms, I think, Mr. Mayo, you mentioned that they are something that's a real cost to the town, but comparatively, that's a more modest increase. So perhaps that's one that needs to be more closely examined, whereas some of the others seem rather arbitrary. And I think at a time where we're trying to, we have all this talk about economic development, the fact that we haven't done something for 20 years doesn't mean it needs to be done. 20 years ago, there could have been a very sound rationale for it, and just the passage of time alone, I think, doesn't necessarily justify these costs. And I agree with my fellow counselors and talking about the idea of streamlining this, and in essence, automating it online. That might actually mean a whole lot less human labor involved to do what needs to be done. So we may actually realize efficiencies that don't currently exist. I don't know. In some aspects, we'll undoubtedly have the fire department coming, to commercial properties. That's going to happen. But some of these other things, if we streamline it, we might be far more efficient, in doing it that way. So I think just kind of taking this in total, and again, if we're to approve this, then we're endorsing this, fee structure to the town, and then the town ultimately will vote on it. It feels almost a little bit premature, given that I think some of these, there might be a justification if we look at how much it costs us as a town to address, whereas others seem rather arbitrary without the same sort of rationale. So I might suggest, considering tabling it and bringing it before a Springtown meeting after we can better justify to the public which of these expenses, is more justified, because as Mr. Mayo pointed out, these are pass-throughs, and the customers are gonna be paying it. But the whole point is, we're talking about how we attract customers, so at a time we're trying to do that, does it make sense? Shouldn't we maybe be thinking about a more comprehensive economic strategy? And I know that Vice Chair Santos and Councilor Donato are working, on economic development, and I think this fits in nicely with that discussion. I just don't know that what presents as rather arbitrary changes now are best, best for us. And since we're going into effect in January of 2021 potentially, if we were to say put this on Springtown meeting, I think we'd still have the opportunity and maybe refine some of these numbers.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and absolutely, and I think we were, sort of a little bit under the gun to kind of get this in now, but there is no reason why it can't wait until the Maytown meeting. And so, if the sense of this council is that we, spend some more time kind of going through each fee, and I'd love to have input specifically from some of the other councilors on that. I'm certainly willing to do that. I mean, to me, sensitive to sort of the point on making sure that whatever we're charging for a fee is tied to expense, I think that's a really valid judgment. I think we did try to do that in this proposal, but again, we can certainly spend more time on that. Also, Mr. May, to your point, if there's an opportunity for us, and I think we need to think through this with Town Council Mullen as well, to come up with a proposal where maybe there's a staged increase to lessen some of the burden. I think that's certainly something that, from my perspective alone, I'd be willing to consider. And so, again, if it's the sense of the group that would make sense for us to bring this back before May, I'm very comfortable with that.
Councilor Smith-Galvin.
I think that makes a lot of sense. One thing that I would consider not tabling until the Springtown meeting would be the $100 late fee. I think not having that right now will continue to be a disincentive to people to apply on time, and I wonder whether it's not worth going ahead, putting that through, and maybe even starting it in 2020 instead of 2021. I'll put that on as an option.
Does anyone have any comment or question on that? Thoughts? Councilor Chines.
Just a comment on that. So I think your point's very well taken. Our sense in coming up with this proposal as it was written was just that we didn't want to put a new fee structure in place basically while the renewal process has started. That was the rationale behind 2021. If we want to stick with that rationale, we have plenty of time to kind of put that in place for 2021 if we bring it up in the Maytown meeting. But I think your point is right. I mean, the two issues could be separated if we decided that that's the way we wanted to go.
Right, because you won't be, you won't be assessing a late fee for the 2020 until well into 2020. So if we did bring that up in the November meeting, if it's worth having that debate, it might be smarter to bring everything up at once.
I think bringing it together would be
Okay.
better.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to discuss it.
Okay, so based on this discussion, do we have a consensus to perhaps table this then? We will not vote to have this added onto the warrant for November of 2018, but the expectation would be that we'd revisit this and with the potential of having it added to the warrant for Springtown meeting. I'll entertain a motion then to that effect.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Chines.
Second.
Seconded by Vice Chair Santos. Any discussion on that? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
With a vote of 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. That will be tabled at this point and revisited. Thank you again, Councilor Chines, Mr. Mayo, and Ms. Dalton. I know there's a lot of work put into this. Appreciate it.
Again, thank you. Thank you to Sherry and Steve.
That's true. So the next piece is item 9D. This is the regular town meeting warrant. I thought perhaps it would make sense, Mr. Mayo, if you could just briefly touch upon the articles that are a part of this warrant, and then the body will vote on that as a whole.
Yep, very quickly, Article 1 is the presentation of my very pithy report on fiscal year 2019. That was in your package. That will be on the town website tomorrow, if not before, so everyone can see about this. We go through each department, see how they did with their budget, what they returned to the town for revenue. We also go through articles and what was returned there and what was encumbered for next fiscal year, and talk about where we're going. So that is a normal town meeting article that actually, under the charter, does need to be delivered in the November or the regular town meeting. Article 2, we talked a lot about that tonight already. That's, and I'll go through and I'll stop for questions at the end. Ed, or do you want me to wait?
Yes, please.
At the end,
Go
okay.
through and then we'll have questions at
Jump
the
in.
end. Yes.
Article 2 is the use of free cash to balance the budget. We talked a lot about that with the assessors, assessor's presentation. That will be for the amount of, it was gonna be 3.54, it'll be 3.94 now, and that'll be used to balance the budget for next fiscal year. Article 3 is a placeholder at this point. It is a, hopefully to have a collective bargaining agreement with our DPW laborers union, and we'll be hopefully talking about that at our next meeting. Article 4 is probably the most exciting article, I think, on this warrant, and that is to fund Wakefield's portion of the rail to trail to get to the next level so we can actually get and put a shovel in the ground. There has been a lot of discussion about this at Linfield, just passed it, and now it is Wakefield's turn. It is $398,000 to get to shovel ready, kind of like we did with our Envision project. We've already spent an amount of money on this, which was a government grant from the state. This is actually now our time to spend our money to show that we have skin in the game. I have spent a lot of time at Mass DOT on this, and I'm very excited about it. As you know, Linfield did finally pass it, and kind of feel odd being behind them. We wanted to wait for them to do this on this, and I hope they're not watching at home. And we will be funding that from the overlay account. The overlay account is kind of excess money that we have collected that has never been put into free cash yet. It's money that the assessors have kind of in their surplus account, that in case they have any abatements that you talked about that are still outstanding. Well, they have about $900,000 in a current balance, and they have a liability or a potential liability that is under $100,000. So there's $700,000 there that could be used. The assessors did vote to remove $398,000 that could be used for this article right here, and that will be my intention to use that for that. So that'll take care of that. I don't think we'll be building another rail to trail, at least in my tenure here. So I think that's a good one-shot deal for that. Article 5, which is actually from the Permanent Building Committee, is the stage 1 on the design for the feasibility study for the Greenwood School. Another very exciting project where they are looking at will the roof work, how will it work, will it support solar, which is part of our whole analysis here, and that is around $102,000. A portion of that will be reimbursed by the state. I don't know what that's gonna be yet, because when you go to these building projects, you kind of never know. My guess is around 50%, but there are things that they accept, things that they don't. So that will come out of free cash and was accounted for in my numbers there. That's a permanent building article. Article 7, which is a retirement board article, and this is to accept a supplemental annual allowance of $12,000 per year for surviving spouses of disabled employees. And what this does is this helps some of our surviving spouses of employees who unfortunately passed away, and they're hence the surviving spouses. And they were older employees or years and years ago, I should say, and really the way that retirement was set up, they're not getting a lot of money in their pension at all from the town. maybe $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a year. This would increase that to $12,000 for this very few people. It's a handful of people. And
7 to 10.
7 to 10
maybe,
people,
yeah.
and there's no more that's gonna be added. So this is a way that we can help. We talked about that a little
Yep.
bit tonight. Why help people, stay in their homes and make a few extra money, be handled through the retirement board appropriation. That is a retirement board article, not anything that needs to be, it's on the warrant, it shall be on the warrant because the retirement board voted to put it there. Article 8 is another retirement board article where the retirement board is seeking to set a stipend for service on the retirement board at $3,000 per member per year. That was, again, their vote, and not something that this board needs to vote on in particular, but it is on the article, on the warrant, because the retirement board voted. Article 9 and 10 we discussed. Article 11 is a citizen's petition regarding some changes to the charter. And Article 12 is a placeholder, again, in case there is any settlement in the Woods LLC matter. I think it is important that we have that there, like we've had before, even though probably there won't be a settlement, but if we, by some reason, there was a settlement on this matter, and we didn't have it on the warrant, we couldn't even vote on it. So this is just kind of keeping our options open. So, which was 12 articles, is now down to 11. I anticipate a one-night town meeting on November 18th. So, and with that, I'll answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Mayo? Okay.
So I think, Mr. Chair, if you had a motion to support the articles as presented by, that are designated by the town council, and to approve the warrant with the exception of Article 6, I think if you put those together, we can handle that.
Right, so just to clarify, we are not endorsing articles that are not
Correct.
indicated as town council.
Correct.
But we are endorsing those that are indicated
Right.
as town council supported, with the exception of Article 6, which has been tabled.
Yeah.
So, and the second part of that would be to approve the warrant in its entirety. Again, that just allows the warrant in the form as presented before you to go before the town as a whole. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved?
Second.
And moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor Smith Galvin. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, then the motion before you is to approve the warrant as identified, with the endorsement of the town council of the articles as so indicated, and advancement of the warrant in its entirety with the exception of Article 6. All those in favor?
Aye.
I see Mr. Mayor, Councilor Mayor over there, so it's actually a 7-0, and the vote passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Item number 10 is licenses. The first is item 10A, a common victular license for Mayara's Restaurant located at 61 New Salem Street. They are seeking a license. The license information is in your packet of materials.
I move that we accept the common victual license for My Irish Restaurant at 61 New Salem Street.
Second.
And moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor Donaco. Any discussion?
Just a quick question, Mr.
Councilor
Chair.
Jones.
This is a new license for a new restaurant, new owner?
New.
She's actually here too.
Oh, she's here too.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome.
It is an existing location where the Chuck Wagon was.
Chuck Wagon.
Sure.
On Salem Street, it's a new owner.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. New operation.
If there's any chance for a tuna melt, they were really good back in the day.
Yeah.
So just throwing it out there. All right, so with that, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then the motion before you is the approval of a common victualer's license for Mayara's Restaurant at 61 New Salem Street. All those in favor?
Aye.
Seeing a vote of 7-0, congratulations and best of luck to you in your new business venture. Item number 10B is an entertainment license. The applicant seeks an entertainment license for one device for Mayara's Restaurant located at 61 New Salem Street.
So moved for the one device entertainment license?
Second.
Okay, moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor May. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, the motion before you is for an entertainment license for Mayara's Restaurant located at 61 New Salem Street. All those in favor?
Aye.
Seeing a vote of 7-0, the motion carries. Next, we have a request for a one-day liquor license by Maureen Miller on behalf of the Wakefield Food Pantry for an event at the AmeriCal Civic Center as indicated in your packets.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor May. Any discussion? Seeing none, the approval is for the one-day liquor license for the Wakefield Food Pantry event as requested by Maureen Miller. All those in favor?
Aye.
Seeing a vote of 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. Item number 11, removal of trees on town property. This is an item related to restitution for destruction of trees adjacent to Crystal Lake. There had been some reference to this at the very beginning of our meeting. I would ask Mr. Fazio if he could come up. And for a little bit of background, perhaps Mr. Mullen, if you could provide a little bit of context for those watching at home and
Sure.
board.
On the weekend of October 5th and 6th, Mr. Thader, who is here tonight, and who owns the property at and resides at 41 Sylvan Ave, cut down 15 well-established trees on town-owned land opposite his house and adjacent to Crystal Lake. At the request of you, Mr. Chairman, and the town administrator, I sent a letter to Mr. Thader on October 17. You have a copy of it. That letter noted that there is a civil statute authorizing the town to recover 3 times the amount of its actual damages, and there is a criminal statute calling for a fine of up to $500 or imprisonment for up to 6 months. I suggested to Mr. Thader that he submit a letter of apology to the council, that he undertake a cleanup of the limbs and other debris that were created by his cutting, and that he propose some appropriate restitution. You have his letter. Mr. Thader and his wife both called me later. I spoke to them both and suggested that they might want to be here tonight. Mrs. Thader was here earlier. And that's the background.
Now, I'll turn over to Mr. Fazio. Mr. Fazio, you had the opportunity to inspect the site, and you've also been working with the town administrator's office. Submitted a memo that all of us have, and the memo is also available in the packets for anyone to see. So perhaps you could just give an overview of what you observed, the conditions, and then what the remedial steps would be.
Yeah, it's at original meeting with Mr. Thader, I had the same suggestion that obviously, you know, with the brush that was cut down, created a fire hazard. It was an eyesore that would need to be removed. There'd have to be a replication of plantings. You know, probably not, we're not gonna replant with Norway maples because that's what the saplings that were cut down, but, and the trees that were cut down, but other species in the area that seem to be doing well over there. And at that point, I also explained that because it was a watershed, the severity of the crime was, you know, was something that we were gonna have to probably be a discussion. And then obviously with social media and whatnot, it kind of exploded into a large-scale event. So, being that said, so we're still back at the point where we have to decide how many trees are gonna go back, whether we put them in that same exact area, we spread them out. We don't necessarily have to make a grove right there, but I mean, trees should be put back in the area, probably species that have been growing there naturally, which would probably be pines and oaks and whatnot. So.
I should just give a further update as well. The packets include a series of photographs. They are all along the street in question, and the area where there was the destruction is indicated. You'll see a number of branches or parts of the tree still on the ground there. I had spoken with Mr. Mayo about this. I understand, and the understanding, and please, if anyone wants to interject, my understanding from Mr. Thader is that he's representing that this was not a deliberate act of destruction. Certainly, and that's what he's indicated in his letter. Nonetheless, we're left with a situation where we have a watershed that had a number of trees that were taken down, and in total, it was 15 trees had been removed, and they were mature trees. They were not.
Yeah, some were 4 to 5 inch caliper, some were smaller saplings, you know, on the side. So.
And for those watching at home, and I've had a chance to speak with some of you individually, that, you know, certainly the consensus, or at least this consensus, as I understand it, is we're not talking about, looking for criminal repercussions and the like. Certainly, that's nothing. I mean, I think Mr. Mullen did a fine job of laying out, what penalties include. I think the consensus already is that that's not the direction that the town is looking to go in, certainly. But instead, we're looking to make sure that there is proper restitution that addresses what we've lost. And I can say to Mr. Thader that we share the empathy that you have presented before us, and so now we're faced with the decision of how we go about addressing the issue. It had been proposed to Mr. Thader, and again, was in the packets, that there be a 2-to-1 ratio of replacement. So in essence, replacing each tree that was removed with 2. And Mr. Fazio had gone through the area, and I believe you said you expected about 12 would be the appropriate number to plant in that area.
If we even get that heavy, I mean, I think obviously I'd be a little hesitant to go in with fully mature trees too,
Sure.
because they're not acclimated to growing under the canopy of the full woods. So obviously we didn't want to come in there blanketed with full mature trees. 6 months from now, they all die. We'd create more of an eyesore. I think the trees that cut down are most likely going to sucker out, and probably in the next 2 seasons, the trunks that were there, unless no damage has been done to them or nothing's been coated on them, but they'll sucker out, and then we could go in there with some other pines and some oaks, and maybe we put the trees that come back, we put them in a place that maybe around town that would do better. But I think we could certainly sprinkle in at least 12 trees in an area that would probably survive.
So our thinking was that there would be 12 that would be in this area, and then the remaining 18 would be spread across town where the need is greatest. And that felt as if it was the best way to get the town closer to being made whole from where it had been before this had occurred. And in order to make sure that we're conserving town resources as well, to bring an outside landscaping company to do those installs as to not cost the taxpayers money in doing that.
Yeah.
In essence. So with that background, because I know a lot of folks watching at home may not have the entire understanding, does anyone have any comments or questions? Vice Chair Santos.
We got a lot of letters on these, and Mr. Thader, you seem very sincere in your apologies. You wrote letters to everybody, and you seem like you're being quite sincere. There was a constant thread throughout the letters of support, which didn't sit super well with me, because as a kind of former prosecutor, when I hear the same story, kept Norway maples invasive, blah, which I'm sure they are, but I'd much rather think that you made a huge mistake, you're sorry for it. I would be more comfortable with Dennis, Steve, and Tom working with Mr. Thader to come up with the most reasonable. Like, I don't want to hold you to 30, the 2 for 1. I'd rather have you all, the professionals, Dennis, make the decision, not the neighborhood.
Yeah.
You make the decision about what goes in. And obviously, I think, Mr. Thader, there has to be a little bit of, there has to be some restitution, because as precedent setting, I don't want everyone else who wants to clear a view in their mind to go out with a chainsaw and whack down some trees. So clearly there has to be something that will prevent future folks from doing this, but I'm more comfortable with that decision being made between Steve, Tom, and Dennis than us declaring what needs to be done from this table.
As I understand, our authority would be to make a general determination, and then the implementation then would be deferred to the town administrator's office, obviously working with our forestry department. But I do think that we have the responsibility to make the determination in a broader sense, and then the execution of that would be through Mr. Mayo's office and
Determination
Mr.
of what?
Fazio. For example, if we identify a number of trees, or just say that it has to be through, have the landscaper, have the landscaper install them, then Mr. Fazio works out all the, in terms of species and the rest, who installs, with an understanding that there's a financial consequence to this that should be taken into account, certainly with any decision. And then I would say, Mr. Mayo, perhaps you would best be positioned to be able to work with Mr. Thader and Mr. Fazio on that aspect of it, so as to not make it, as to make sure that we get it done, but not unduly burdensome at the same time. Counselor Donaco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, from looking through the pictures, I didn't go to the site, I'm only going by all the letters that were sent out, the inter-department emails that were sent as well, too. We're talking 15 trees were taken down? And if these pictures are any indication, we're talking about 4 inches?
4 to 5. or something.
Maximum height of a tree was probably 20 feet?
Yeah.
Okay, the existing base trees that are there, the pines, the oaks, what are they, about 40 feet?
Anyways.
Anyway, maybe even higher, so whether or not these were doing damage to those trees, I understand the neighborhood's concern about, they're invasive and things like that. It was still that someone went onto town property and took it upon themselves to cut down trees. Whether or not they knew the trees type or concern, there has to be, I agree, some restitution has to be made on this. It's the degree of restitution that I'm struggling with. 15 trees came down. We're asking potentially to double it to 30. Okay, just out of curiosity, how did the number 30 come up? Does anybody know how that number was derived originally?
Well, I mean, the law says that you can go up to 3 to 1.
So we automatically went 3 to 1.
Well, I mean, I wasn't.
No,
um,
2 to
That
1.
would have been 45.
We went
That
to
would have
2
been
to
45, that's right. So we went 2 to 1.
2 to 1.
If I may, I think also the thought is, realistically, no one's going to take a tree of 4 or 5 inch caliper at breast height and install it. The cost would be astronomical.
Right.
So these 15 trees would be replaced by what amount to saplings, or something just a little older than saplings. And it would be unfair, I think, to the town to replace 15 mature trees of 20 feet or more in height that had probably been growing for 22 decades or more with saplings in the same number.
Okay. So we were looking to get a larger caliber tree instead of the sapling, is that
No,
what you're saying?
No,
we have to
what
go
I'm
with the
suggesting
You
is,
have to go with the sapling.
given that these replacement trees would necessarily be much thinner and
Yes.
shorter, smaller and younger than the trees that were cut down,
Yes.
we would need more of them.
Oh, I understand now. Okay, I understand where the rationale is.
Counselor Smith Galvin.
I mean, I have to say, this is really, I've given this a lot of thought, and this has been a really disturbing incident in our town. I did spend some time up there. Whatever your reason for doing it, they were only cut in front of your house, so it seems to me that I think the normal inference would be that it was for a view, not for managing a forest, and that is not a managed forest, Mr. Fazio, so whatever grows there, grows there. Not only that, there are 7 to 9 signs there that say drinking water supply area, no trespassing. I mean, there is just, and that's a one-way street in. You have to pass those signs every single day. So I do not want to, hurt a young family that is coming into here, but I feel very strongly that there has to be some restitution. It has to be a deterrent to other people. We have a lot of households living along wetlands. We do not have a strong wetlands policy in Wakefield itself, so we're relying on the state policy. That might be something that, I hope this spurs a bigger conversation about how we can do better awareness raising and put some better enforcement into place over the long run. But I feel very strongly that what is outlined in the letter is what the restitution has to be. I would leave the administration of that to Mr. Mayo, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Fazio, and the person that we're talking about.
Further comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, maybe just a sort of a
Councilor
broader
Childs.
comment. Setting aside sort of the environmental, the ecological, what's an invasive species and what's not, that's certainly not my area of expertise. I mean, I think as a legal principle, this was town property, this wasn't private property, and that to me is what I kind of keep getting hooked in on, which is that, a private citizen doesn't have the right to destroy something on town property the same way that I don't have the right to, go into my neighbor's yard and take down a tree if I think it's the wrong thing. I do think the precedent is important, and I think that the message that I hope comes out of this all, not just for the residents on Sylvan Ave, but I think for the town in general, is that if there is an issue, if there are invasive species growing in town-owned land, that's why we've got Mr. Fazio, that's why we have a Department of Public Works. The right recourse is to contact the town or contact one of the 7 of us on this council if you don't feel that you're getting, the answer or the support or the involvement that you need. I hope, again, sort of stepping back from this issue, I hope that's a lesson that sort of everyone in town hears, that, again, town-owned land doesn't mean that an individual townsperson has the right or the authority to decide what to do with that. It does have to go, excuse me, back to the town.
Thank you, Councilor Chance, for that. Any other further comments or questions? Okay, so I think we're then at the point now where I would entertain a motion for a determination of the penalty related to the destruction that was done along Sylvan Avenue, and with the expectation that Town Administrator's Office, along with Mr. Fazio, would work through implementing whatever this body decides. Councilor Smith Galvin.
I move that we ask the town administrator and Councilor Mullen to seek restitution as outlined in the letter.
So to clarify, actually, is there a second? Let me
I'll
clarify.
second, but-
Second,
Let's
and
discuss.
just to clarify for the letter, when you make reference to the letter asks for a 2-to-1 replacement, species to be determined by Mr. Fazio, and install to be by a private landscape
Yes.
company. Okay, and you're seconding that
I'm
motion?
seconding that with just a quick, what we're not talking about penalty as far as monetary though, as dictated, are we?
No.
the mo-
No, whatever,
As I-
it would have to be determined what the amount is, but.
Based upon how much it would cost to do the tree.
Yes.
Would be in excess of that amount.
I understood to be the replacement of 30 trees, whatever that cost is.
Right, but we don't
Not-
know what that cost is
we
right
don't-
now.
Okay.
Right, but
I
not
just-
a financial penalty on top of that, which I think
No,
you
no,
were
no,
mentioning.
no, only,
Okay, I just want to
The
make sure that you
services and
we
the-
weren't considering going over and above the cost of the trees with a penalty, that's all.
Okay, so just so we're clear then, so Councilor Smith Galvin has a motion that the proper restitution would be the replacement of the trees that were destroyed with 30 trees to be placed, and species to be determined, and placement to be determined through Mr. Fazio, and all installs to be done with a landscape company, and Mr. Thader would work with Town Administrator's Office and Mr. Fazio in terms of all logistics of implementation of that decision. Do I have that correct?
yes.
Okay, and Councilor Donaco, you support that, you second that? All right, so with that, is there discussion? Councilor Butt.
So it makes me I understand the trees, not knowing the price of any of that makes me really uncomfortable. So it's a young I believe in restitution, but I think it's so vague that makes me really uncomfortable. And especially as you're throwing on a private landscaper, and not to put any limitation, and I almost, look to Steve and Dennis and Tom to work with the family, but I think for us is just to say, without any that just makes me uncomfortable. I like the 2-to-1 ratio. We have a tree arborist. We are fortunate to have Dennis. I've worked with Dennis on a product. I trust him. But putting in that landscaper, I understand your reasoning of not using town money, but we have town experts. And adding on that additional cost, it makes me uneasy. So I don't know if there's a way that we can figure out the cost or max it
I think
or
we should just
cap it.
clarify too, we often hire landscapers to do plantings around town, so
Yeah,
that's
we do.
not
We've
an
been using them,
uncommon
yeah.
practice.
I think that would be the lesser of the costs.
Yeah.
Truly, I don't think that's that's not the deciding factor, is the cost of the landscaper to go in there. It'd be, whether we go for full 2 to 2.5 inch caliper trees, or, dropping down to 1.5 inch caliper trees, can make a difference. Obviously, 2 to 2.5 can can be upwards of $300 a tree. So it's like our standard, so, obviously if we go with smaller, you know, they can drop down if, specific species, and time of year is probably also gonna play into how much the trees cost too, so.
When you say that, are you saying that this is a good time of year or a bad time of year for?
No, I think, I mean, there's a little more selection, obviously, in the springtime, you know. Right now, all the nurseries are trying to clean house, so we're a little limited on what's available for size, so might not be able to fine tune the right size we want. They might have larger, they might have a lot smaller. So, that's why we would have to make some phone calls, and I couldn't tell you right now whether we could fine tune and definitely hit the $300 mark a tree, or whether it'd be less. If right now all they have is 1.5-inch caliber trees, and that's what we decide, and they're good size, and, you know, and they're what's gonna fill our fulfillment, then we can go with that. If they don't have them and all they have is larger size, and, like I said, I'd be hesitant to go in there with fully mature, you know, larger than 2.5-inch caliber trees in a canopy like that, just because they're not acclimated to the area, and they might not do as well as a smaller one. But, you know, maybe splitting the difference where we come in with a replication in the area, and then others are made to the tree donation fund, and we put those in open areas that, you know, could survive if you know, we also have that option.
Vice Chair Santos.
To go off of what Maureen said, I think that the 2-to-1 is fine. There has to be a strong precedent, but I am uncomfortable not knowing what an end number is. Assuming that everyone finds this gentleman to be sincere, and that he was, you know, stupid for 2 days of his citizenship in Wakefield and won't be stupid again. Stupid's harsh, bad judgment, but I'm uncomfortable with just not knowing what the end number is. And I would hope if the number seems to be crushing for this family, then you could come back to us and say, maybe we go down on the number of trees. I don't want to crush a young family. Do we want to send a message? Yes. Tom?
No, Mr. Chairman, if perhaps the motion could be amended just to set a not-to-exceed figure.
Do we have, Mr. Casio, do we have a sense of what 30 trees and the landscape install would cost? Understanding there are variables, you know, species, caliper, I understand all that. Do you have a sense?
I can't see that it would probably be more than maybe $1,000. I mean, worst case would be, I think that to get a landscaper in there for a full day, I don't even think it would be a full day to go in and, you know, to do 12 trees in that area. Obviously, like I said, I'm more concerned with the price of the trees. I think obviously our standard, what I'm familiar with is 2 to 2.5-inch caliber. I know that runs upwards of $300 a tree, so that gives us something to work with. If we drop it down to a smaller caliber, then we're talking less money. You know, it could be that of $200.
So you're saying that when you mentioned the $1,000, that's what you're referring to, the install cost?
Yeah.
So you're comfortable saying $1,000 for a landscaper?
Yeah.
And that's in total across all the trees, right?
For 30 trees, if it were to be 30 trees?
30 trees, no, 30 would be more than that. I was just thinking of the initial 12, but to go in with 30 into the woods, you know, you're talking a couple.
I'm not suggesting into the woods, but I'm suggesting
in
the
general,
requisite number in the woods and then
probably
across town throughout that.
Depends on the size of the crew, and it could be close to 3,000 for 30.
Go ahead, Paul had his own.
So,
Councilor Donato.
I'll give an estimate on this. Based at his 300 low, I would say that I would double it and go to 600 per tree and add in the $3,000 for install. You can either cap it at 20,000, not to exceed 20,000, which I think would be ballpark. But that's going 600 a tree, though.
I don't think it'd
Why
be
are you going
600
600 if the expert says 300?
300 is if you could get the.
No, we wouldn't go higher than 300.
You don't think you go higher than 300?
That's a 2-inch
Then you go,
tree,
then
so,
you cap it at 15,000.
you know.
That'll be 3 times, it would be 9 plus the 3. You could go anywhere between 12 and 15,000 for, based upon what Dennis is telling us. Because your minimum is going to be 9,000 just for the trees. And he just said 3,000 for the landscaper, correct? So you're looking at a minimum of $12,000 right there, if you wanted to just go with those numbers.
So,
Mr. Chair, sorry, may I?
Yes, Councilor Chines.
You know, one of the pieces of direction that I hope we as a council consider for Mr. Fazio and Mr. Mayo is that, you know, while sort of restitution is important, certainly talking about a maximum financial responsibility is important as well, but also making sure that, you know, whether it's our money or Mr. Thader's money or whoever, that, you know, we're spending the funds wisely. So what I don't want to do is rush to put in 30 trees if the species and specimens of trees aren't ideal for the time of year, and we're rushing to get ahead of the weather, or, you know, we do something that doesn't, you know, that effectively accelerates the restitution without actually achieving the end that we want, which is basically to be made whole for the trees that were destroyed. And so I guess my request as we think about Councillor Smith-Galvin's motion is that, you know, we encourage, again, Mr. Mayo and Mr. Fazio to, you know, be mindful of both the viability of trees, but also what's the most cost-effective option, so that, you know, if we're, you know, asking Mr. Thader to, you know, to make up for the destruction of the trees that we've been talking about, that, you know, we're not putting them in a situation, putting him and his family in a situation where we're asking them to spend more money than we need to if we waited 6 months or 8 months or whatever the right timing is to find the right variety of trees and to assure that they're going to survive.
And I think to that point, that's, if we were to delegate that responsibility to Mr. Mayo's office along with Mr. Fazer, you can make those determinations as to what should be planted before year's end, what should be planted in the spring. I think there's a general consensus, right, that we want to make sure this is done right, not as fast as possible. Is that a fair consensus?
Yeah. I think,
So-
and also as efficiently as possible. Again, I want to
Absolutely,
be mindful
yeah.
of the fact that,
I mean, if you have a, yeah, I mean, if you have a landscaping crew coming in to plant other trees and you can piggyback, you know, these on, you know, that would seem to make sense, you know, and then just prorate, you know, whatever portion of that would be. We want to be reasonable here. I think we all share that goal. Okay, so Mr. Mullen had actually suggested that we add a not to exceed to Counselor Smith-Galvin's motion. Would you like to amend your motion?
Yes, so, as outlined, at a cost not to exceed, am I hearing $15,000, $12,000? I don't know. Or my other thing I was thinking, I mean, maybe this is something that gets worked out and brought back to us.
That, I would feel much
If
more comfortable.
I'm okay with that too. I mean, I think this has been a good discussion. I think the expectation is that we want 2 to 1 trees planted in the most, you know, efficient, when they have the highest likelihood of being able to survive. You know, come up with a plan. And honestly, I'd like the part of that plan to be about awareness and looking at some of our enforcement regulations and definitions of wetlands and coordinating kind of trees across the way. And I know the Environmental Sustainability Committee is already working on some of that. So perhaps it's a more comprehensive proposal.
Mr. Fazer, would you be able to get that information so that we would know, say, even what's available for purchase now, what's available in the spring, just from a pricing perspective, so we'd have a better sense of that?
Yeah, I think price-wise, it's just more about selection, really. I think price is probably, unless they do a huge markup again next year, I mean, the last couple of seasons, they've gone up considerably.
But you're expecting around 300 apiece. I mean,
Yeah, I
that
think
seems
that's
like
a safe number.
you're
you
pretty
know?
safe with that number.
Yeah, I mean, some go up, some species are a little higher, some a little lower, and it all depends on what they have, and they have a run of.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have a run of oak trees, and they blow them out for a little discounted rate. Other times, certain trees are, they're higher, you know, with no reason. But, I mean, if you figured 300, you know, that's a safe number, because that way, obviously, that's going with a, you know, pretty decent tree. So like I said, obviously, we can go back down from that, but still at 30 times 300, I mean, 21 is 6,500, right? So another 10.
So about 9,000.
About 9,000 plus or minus installation cost, you know, so.
I guess all I'm getting at is, are you going to have more refined information to come back to us? It sounds like probably not. It's probably going to be 300 a tree is what you're expecting it to be.
I can make some phone calls and find out what, like, the pines are going for.
Okay.
And that might make it a change if we're buying bulk and oaks too, you know. There's different levels of white pines that you can buy too. Some are shared, some are natural. That affects the price too, so if we go with that, so, but I could certainly get a little more aggressive and make some more phone calls and get back.
If you could work with Mr. Mayo on that and report back to us at the next meeting, is that something you'd be able to do?
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll table this for the moment. I think you have the general direction that this body seems to be wanting to go in, and then you can maybe, with the understanding that we're trying to be as efficient here, as we can under these circumstances financially for these folks.
I just wanted to add to that, to the extent that we're not gonna put, say we do get 30 trees, we're not gonna put all of them right back in that area. I would like to see them put in, if it's possible, to distribute them again across wetlands and watersheds, not just a shade tree kind of downtown, but something that does protect our wetlands if there's the need and that's feasible. I just want you to know that as you're starting to budget things, if that makes a difference.
All right.
Mr. Fazio, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Councilor Smith.
I really
Councilor
like that
Bott.
solution. Thank you for coming back to us. I also just, I'm looking at you, Steve, and is Joe still back there, and Dennis, I'm gonna echo what Julie said. So I did drive by the street. I have friends that live on the street. You guys, all the neighbors, you guys, it's a great watershed that you guys have. And our job is to preserve our lakes and our parks for future generations. And I think we really need to think about how we educate people about that, and never mind protecting the water, but protecting that area. And, I hate even talking about this, but, do situations like this, do we need to put up a fence? Like, there are signs, every driveway there was a sign about no trespassing. And I drove by on Saturday and somebody set up there's lanterns, there's decorations up there, and it's great. It is why people move to Wakefield, but I think we have to do a better job about what that means and what those resources mean. And I think it's DPW and Dennis and our town and us and the environmental and sustainable, because I think we've somehow lost it of this belongs to all of us, and we all need to kind of protect it, and we all have a sense of responsibility. So just to harp on what Julie said.
Thank you, Councilor Butt. Any other comments or questions? Well, I think there's at least some direction that's been offered here tonight, Dennis. So I thank you, Mr. Fazio, for staying late. Thank you, Mr. Mayo, and thank you, Mr. Vader, for coming as well. And we'll reconvene this issue at the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, moving on then to our next agenda item.
Thank you, Dennis.
We are actually going to take agenda item 12. We're going to table that, and we'll have that at the November 13th meeting. Item number 13, constituent issues, because we're running a bit long with this meeting. If there are any immediate constituent issues, please raise them. If not, we can discuss them at the 13th meeting, or obviously reach out to me in advance. Seeing none, we'll move on then. Item number 14, Chairman's comments. I will also table those for the next time. I just wanted to make one brief mention. Councilor Chines and I, along with Mr. Mayo, had the opportunity to go to the 90-plus birthday celebration at the Senior Center last week. And it was great to see over 60 Wakefield residents who are independently living in their homes and are out and about and socializing. And the Senior Center just provides so many opportunities for folks that are otherwise not able to have the kind of socialization and just the access to so many great programs. So it was a great opportunity, and thank you, Councilor Chines, for all your help in distributing a lot of certificates of recognition to some folks.
Well, it was great to be able to do that, and I would say every time that I've had the opportunity to go to the Senior Center, I think I've spent more time there, probably 2 or 3 times as much time as I plan to when I go in, which is just a testament to the great job that Judy, Luciano, and the Council on Aging and her staff do in pulling that together. So it was quite a bit of fun.
And we have on the screen here now, so I'll just point this out as well. I just draw everyone's attention to our website, our town's website. If you look at the top right corner of the homepage, it says Get Town News. If you click on that, then you can get email alerts sent right to your inbox. And so when things like this agenda are posted, when our packets are posted, when meeting minutes are posted, you just drop in your email address, and you can select exactly what boards and what committees you get information from, or just town news in general. So I'd encourage everyone to check that out, because it is a great resource. It's real-time notifications here in town. Item number 15, appointments. We have 2 appointments that we need to make, and so at this point we'll need to advertise for them. Item 15A is for the town council appointed member of the Human Rights Commission. We thank Mr. Bob Vincent for his very dedicated service to the Human Rights Commission. He is leaving the commission, and so there's an opportunity for the appointment of someone to take his place. So I will entertain a motion to authorize Ms. Dalton in our town administrator's office to advertise for this new commissioner position to complete the remainder of the 3-year term ending April 30th of 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Donaco, seconded by Vice Chair Santos. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, then the motion before you, the posting of the Human Rights Commission opening. All those in favor?
Aye.
Vote is 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. Item 15B is the Board of Health. We also want to thank Allison Melman for her dedicated service over the years to the Board of Health. She is also resigning, and so we have an opportunity to advertise for someone to fill that position through Ms. Dalton in the town administrator's office. This position would have a term ending April 21st of 2020 on the Board of Health. I'll entertain a motion for the posting of someone to fill this role.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Donaco, seconded by Vice Chair Santos. Any discussion?
Just a quick question, Mr.
Councilor
Chair,
Chines.
maybe more for Mr. Mullen. So given that this is an elected board, the appointment would be sort of by joint vote of the remaining Board of Health members and town council?
That's right.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vote is 7-0. Motion carries. Next, item number 16 is, relates to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Mr. Mayo, if you could just briefly touch on this.
Yes, I received a phone call the other day from Thatcher Keyser, who was the Chief Operating Officer for Mayor Spicer in Framingham, and I've had the chance to meet Mayor Spicer on a couple of occasions at the MMA. And Framingham is interested in being the Metro West Region representative to the Boston Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization. We usually don't have a dog in this fight because it is Metro West. And usually there's not multiple candidates, so it's not even an election. But Mr. Keyser did reach out to me, and I would say that I've served with him on the MMA. He could be a valuable asset to us if we had anything to go in front of the MPO and work with them regards to regional transportation issues. So I would suggest that we honor Mayor Spicer's request, that we do authorize the chair to vote for Yvonne M. Spicer as the applicant to the Metro West Regional Collaborative, from the Metro West Regional Collaborative to the MPO election. And we'd have to send that in right away, so that's why it came right out to this board.
So moved.
Any discussion? Moved by Vice Chair Santos, seconded by Councilor Donaco. Any discussion? Seeing none, then the motion before you is to grant me the authority to vote for Framingham as our vote for the Metro West Regional Collaborative via absentee ballot. All those in favor?
Aye.
Vote is 7-0, the motion carries. Next, item number 17 is Holiday Stroll. The Wakefield Community Partnership had actually appeared before this body back in February, and we had approved several events that they had identified over the course of the year. The last of those events is the Holiday Stroll, which is set for December 7th, 2019. We have an application that has been submitted by the Wakefield Community Partnership relative to their event. We have Ms. Katie Dolan available as well to answer any questions that you may have. And I'm happy to welcome up Ms. Dolan. Thank you for staying late.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah. All right. So, hi, everybody. As Ed said, I'm Katie Dolan. I am the secretary and one of the directors for Wakefield Community Partnership, and I'm happy to answer any questions pertaining to the stroll. This is very standard from what we've done in the past, which has always been, you know, really a well-received event and one that's really enjoyed by people in Wakefield as well as surrounding communities. We've had a very, you know, positive response from the merchants and from attendees as well in previous years.
Would you mind just speaking briefly? The time is slightly different this year, correct?
Yes.
Could you explain that?
Sure. So this year, as a board, we decided to hold the event from 2 to 6 p.m. Based on our own feelings from last year at our debrief meeting, as well as kind of feedback that we got from others involved. We really wanted to try to kind of saturate the actual event with as many performers, activities as possible, and we just kind of felt like by the end, that extra time wasn't really as needed or as well utilized, and we'd rather make best use of the 4 hours that we're having.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
So this is just for an outdoor event. Are you coming back with an alcohol license or any other? This is just a family?
This is just an outdoor family event. I think the only additional request that we'll have in the future is for the banner to advertise the event, which we are still looking for sponsors. So if anybody wants to kind of talk it up to some of the people that might be interested, we would really appreciate that.
Great.
So with that, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the 11th Annual 'Tis the Season Holiday Stroll and Shop 2019 on Saturday, December 7th from 2 until 6 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor May, seconded by Counselor Donaco. Any further discussion?
Just a discussion, and this is just, have you spoken to Public Safety Building? Does that happen after?
Well, once it's approved, we have a logistics meeting.
Great.
Yeah, but everything,
So-
we've been through this before. so
Yeah,
that
no,
will
I
absolutely
know, I
happen,
just want
yeah.
to make sure that
Yep,
when
and
we close down
we're prepared
streets.
to
Yep.
discuss that with them.
Perfect.
And like I said, we're going to be doing the exact same format, so I think everyone involved will be happy that we can kind of follow the past protocol.
My only bit of advice is if you're recruited as a judge in the cookie taste, don't eat the entire cookie, just take a bite of each. Because
You know, we actually we
by
discussed that the other
15th
night.
cookie, you're like, sugar coma.
So word has it, just so while we're talking, there will be multiple contests this year. There's a at your hat contest for the hat parade, an ugly sweater contest to go along with the best decorated storefront. There'll also be a cookie baking contest. So for all
Just
your
small bites.
Yep.
small bites.
We will once again be looking for judges, and we also would love all of you to come and help us lead the parade and offer some greetings from the library steps.
Great.
So.
Thank you. All right, so there's a motion that's been seconded now. I believe all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous vote, 7-0. Congratulations and great, best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item 18, is a banner request. Wakefield Alliance Against Violence has submitted an application for a banner request to go across Main Street in the common location. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to,
Moved by
Second.
Counselor May, seconded by Counselor Donaco. Any discussion? Seeing none, the motion before you is the waive request for a banner to hang from December 16th through December 23rd. Actually, I should clarify. They're requesting December 23rd or 30th, so I think we should determine a date certain for them on that. So, would you like to amend your motion with a termination date of the 23rd or 30th? Why don't we say the 30th?
30th.
All right, so it'll run from December 16th until December 30th. All right.
The 30th.
And seconded by Counselor Donaco still?
yes.
Okay. All those, any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Vote of 7-0, the motion passes. One thing I do want to make mention of relative to banner requests is, going forward, I've touched base with Town Administrator's Office on this. I think we should just have a set protocol for this. It happens through Gas and Light, it happens through us, banners go up without, so we need to just have a streamlined process that's easy to follow. It can be online and the rest, but right now we have this kind of this hodgepodge right now, and I know Sherry does a great job, but it's hard to know what's gonna be hanging when, and we just need to have a centralized process for doing it. So I think that's something we should look into, hopefully for the next meeting. Item number 19 is a request to approve gifts that have been provided to the library. These are included in your packets, and they're from various patrons, printing supplies, materials, and toner. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor May, seconded by Counselor Donaco. Any discussion? The motion before you is the approval of the library, acceptance of library gifts. All those in favor?
Aye.
Vote of 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. Item number 20 is warrants. Counselor Chines, if you could just briefly give an overview.
Briefly, on October 4th, I signed warrants numbers 9 through 13, totaling approximately $8.7 million, mostly payroll, funding of our obligations to the GIC for health insurance, and various enterprise transfers to water and sewer. Nothing sort of out of the ordinary otherwise. I know the information wasn't in the original version of the packet, but thank you to Ms. Dalton, was circulated this morning and added to the packet as well, so the rest of the council should have that.
So, Madam Clerk, do we have that now on the website, the warrants breakdown, or can we add that to the website?
Yeah, it's already on.
It is,
Yeah.
perfect, great. Great, and there's no vote there. Any questions for Counselor Chines? Thank you again for your continued work on that, Counselor Chines. All right. Next item would be any matters not anticipated within the 48 hours of the public notice requirements. Does anyone have any matters to that effect? Okay, seeing none, item number 22 is announcements and acknowledgements. Any town councilors, town administrator, clerk, or town council have any announcements or acknowledgements?
I'll do it real quick.
Counselor Donaco.
We had a great event at the Galvin on Saturday, the Healthy Expo. Wonderful job by the chamber in their hosting of the event. I have to mention that the police department was there doing their bit with the drug take back as well as the child safety seats. We had Sergeant McCall, thank you. Sergeant McCall, officers Rondo and Tobine were there doing their bit for as far as the public was concerned. We've had a couple of other events with the police department. They just had a successful RAD course going on with several of the officers. And I think that's about it right now.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Counselor.
Just so
Counselor
sorry,
Segal.
just quickly, just because there are a few things before the next meeting. WCAT, who we all love here, there are some board openings. So if anybody's interested in serving on the board of WCAT, there is an application out. You can look on their Facebook page or their web page, and I also see they're looking for crew. So lots of ways to get involved here. The Environmental Sustainability Committee is working with the DPW on some grant applications under the Municipal Vulnerability Program, which would work on setting a greenhouse gas inventory and some targets. So more to come on that. And then finally, Halloween is Thursday, and Black Earth Composting, which services the Wakefield area, is collaborating with each of the elementary schools. People can drop off their pumpkins at any of the 4 elementary schools on November 5th, and they're going to compost all the pumpkins. And some of the schools are even doing kind of a throw it into the truck day. So kind of a fun day
I will
around
say
Wakefield.
for my children, that is really the appeal of it. They are actually doing a pumpkin drop of
Right.
any pumpkins that are dropped there. So
Right. So lots of
a
pumpkins.
lot of fun and also a good environmental cause.
Right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone else? Counselor Butt.
Just a couple of things. So it was so nice to see the Girl Scouts here earlier today. They're such a great bunch. They really enjoy learning about civics. On that note, as they did the pledge, Steve, I got a comment that our committees and commissions and boards that are having meetings in the office at Town Hall next to yours, there's no flag in there. And if we could order a flag, it would be appreciated by some of the groups as they do the pledge now before their meetings. And just a couple more updates. Steve, myself, and Jen McDonald had a conversation with the Department of Transportation about the survey that we had done and got 300 people to respond to. The Department of Transportation was really interested in our ideas and actually have asked for some more specifics about what we would like to see, buses and the commuter rail for those of us that take it on a regular basis. So I just wanted to publicly thank Jen for all the work that she's done and Steve on that and just give people an update. So I think they've asked us for even more specifics and clarifications in the next couple of weeks, so which is great. They were really impressed by our survey. An update tomorrow, Town Clerk Betsy Sheeran and I have been doing Wakefield from the Inside Out at the Town Library at 7 p.m. tomorrow. We did one last week. We had a handful of people come on by the library, RSVP, so we're expecting you, but tomorrow at 7. And just one other announcement, our neighbor, our Melrose Mayor, Gail Inferno, is ending her term, and so I just want to wish her well and thank her for her service as she ends her interim term And Melrose will have a new mayor next week.
Thank you, Councilor Dodd. Anyone else? Councilor Chines.
Just very briefly, keeping on the Halloween theme that Councilor Smith-Galvin mentioned. First of all, the Chamber of Commerce, in addition to helping to put on the Healthy Living Expo at the Galvin, is hosting a children's Halloween costume party at the Sheridan on Wednesday night, 5:30 to 7 o'clock. So for folks in town, that is actually free and open to the public, and so anyone who has kiddos who want to have another opportunity to put on their costumes, great opportunity to do that, and really grateful to the Chamber for putting that on. Thursday, of course, is Halloween, and just a reminder to folks that are watching, please be careful. There'll be a lot of kids out. I mean, one of the great things about a community like Wakefield is, people feel safe and enjoy walking out in the community, especially on a day like that. So as it's getting dark out and as, our streets are getting busier, just please be mindful that kids will be out in sometimes not the most obvious and visible costumes for Halloween. So keep an eye out.
Thank you. And on that, if anyone could identify who's going to be handing out full-size candy bars, I think that would actually be really.
I was going to say the Boy
quite
House on
informative.
Parker Road in Prospect does.
We historically have.
Oh, good to know, actually. All right, keep that in mind. On a more serious note, I do want to recognize that we're coming to the end of Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October, and Wakefield Alliance Against Violence has done a lot to help to educate the public on that. But I just heard a story recently about someone who was just killed by her partner, and watching the mom talk about that was just heart-wrenching. And while the Awareness Month might be concluding, the awareness does not. And going forward, I would just ask that everyone just still be mindful. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, there are resources we have available here within town and across the state. I also want to thank WCAT, thank you Tom Stapleton and Ryan Boyd and the entire crew here for staying up late with us. Thank you all for watching. I know we're going against Monday Night Football tonight, so our next meeting will actually be on a Wednesday. Hopefully the ratings will be higher, and it's Wednesday, November 13th at 7 p.m. Broadcasting here from WCAT Studios. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor May, seconded by Councilor Donaco. All those in favor? Aye. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Good night, Wakefield, and thank you for watching.